Chairman, I can confirm that the live stream is now operating.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Customer and Support Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Before consideration of today's business, I will outline the protocols for the meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed to the public via Microsoft Teams and is also being recorded. May I remind members and officers to introduce yourselves each time you speak and to turn your video and microphone off when you have finished speaking. If the Council's live stream fails during the meeting and we cannot share the proceedings, I will adjourn the meeting so that access can be restored. If the issue cannot be resolved, I will halt the meeting and the remaining business will be conducted at a future date. If a member experiences a technical issue, I will adjourn for a short period to try and re-establish their connection. Members wishing to speak or ask a question should indicate by typing across in the chat box. As I call members to speak, I will remind you to switch your microphone on. If for some reason you cannot be heard, the Democratic Services Officer will advise you. Votes will be taken using a roll call procedure. The Democratic Officer will read out the recommendation and the name of the proposer and seconder, and will then call each committee member's name in turn. You should confirm your name and advise whether you vote in favour or against the recommendation, or whether you wish to abstain from the vote. The Democratic Officer will then count the votes and advise the result accordingly. Where a member has declared a non-registrable interest, a disclosable pecuniary interest, or an interest by virtue of any trade union membership in a matter, they must leave the virtual meeting. Their departure will be confirmed and they will be invited to rejoin the meeting at the appropriate time. I plan to have a short break around 11:45, and if the meeting looks to continue past 2 o'clock, I will break for half an hour's lunch around 1:30. However, I will try to avoid breaking the mid-agenda item. Before we start today's business, I will ask the Democratic Services Officer to confirm members and officers who are in attendance.
Good morning, Tracy Clark, Democratic and Governance Officer. This is confirmation of the voting members. I will call your name. Please confirm your name and your electoral division. Councillor Atherfold.
Councillor Atherfold, Camborne Treslothern.
Councillor Barnes.
Councillor Barnes, Redruth North. I'd like to ask you a question, Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Barnes.
Yes, you said about people declaring an interest. How can you define the union membership as having an influence? Because I'm a trade union member, so how would you define that union membership?
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. I assume that this wording is taken from some national guidance, so I'll seek support from the Democratic Services Officer on this as to how this is actually defined, but I'm assuming it comes from national guidance. Tracy, can you shed any light on this?
Okay. I think it's really if it's a matter for the individual member to decide whether or not they have an interest, and it's really whether or not you think reasonably a member of the public would think that it was appropriate or not for you to be at a particular agenda item. And if you're unsure, it would be best to seek legal advice from the legal department of the council. That's the best advice I can give, really, is it's up to the individual member whether or not they declare an interest, and if they do believe that they have an interest, that reasonably a member of the public would expect them not to be present at that item, then they would need to leave the meeting for the duration of that item.
Chairman, the monitoring officer has indicated she wishes to speak.
Yes, thank you. I wondered if Mel was on the call, whether or not she could shed some light on this.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Melanie O'Sullivan. I'm the Service Director for Assurance and Monitoring Officer. So Councillor Barnes, just to answer your question, that is taken from the Local Government Association Model Code and is contained within our Code of Conduct. I don't anticipate there's anything in your union work that would prevent you speaking on today's agenda. But of course, if you need any advice around that, then please do let me know. But it is in our Code of Conduct. And just to make you aware, members, we are consulting on our new Code of Conduct, so there's an opportunity if you have any comments or concerns to share that through our consultation process.
Councillor Barnes, are you sort of happy with that?
I wouldn't say the word is happy. I accept what Ms Sullivan says, but I don't think that just for being a member of a trade union, we should be selected out or picked off. And so I think when it comes to review, that should be questioned and omitted.
Well,
I would always declare an interest if I thought I had one.
No, that's fine, Councillor Barnes. But I think, as Mrs Sullivan mentioned, it's being reviewed at the moment, so your input, I think, will be welcomed. All
right, who's going to do the reviewing?
I presume that'll be Constitution and Governance Committee, unless Mrs Sullivan tells me otherwise.
So, Chairman, I suggest we do take this online. This is not a matter for this committee.
No,
this is a matter for the Standards Committee. And should Councillor Barnes have any concerns, he can raise it through that process. I'm also happy to have a detailed conversation with Councillor Barnes offline as to why it might apply. And I'm confident that having had a conversation, he'll understand why it could apply in circumstances.
Thank you very much. Can we proceed with the attendance question now, please?
Continuing with confirmation of the voting members of the committee, Councillor Biggs.
Dave Biggs, Camborne, Treswithian.
Councillor Burden.
Neil Burden, Stoke Climsland.
Councillor Buscombe.
Richard Buscombe, Padstow Division.
Councillor Eddy.
Good morning, Martin Eddy, St Clear Division.
Councillor Fitter.
Good morning, John Fitter, Colin, St Morgan and Newquay North.
Councillor Frost.
Councillor Frost, Bobington Petrock.
Councillor Hawkins.
Helen Hawkins, St Barrow.
Councillor Keeling.
Councillor John Keeling, Breed, Gurmo and Setney Division.
Councillor Monk.
Councillor Monk, Newquay Treloggan.
Councillor Moorcroft.
Good morning, Robin Moorcroft, Weybridge West.
Councillor Mould.
Good morning, Carol Mould, St Mimber and St Endelian Division.
Councillor Saunders.
Good morning, Councillor Sally Ann Saunders, Bugle Division.
Thank you, members. I can confirm that the following cabinet members are also present at the meeting. Councillor Julian German, Leader of the Council, Councillor Adam Painter, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Resources, Councillor Mike Thorne-Gibbons, Cabinet Member for Customers, Councillor Edwina Hannaford, Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Neighbourhoods. I can also confirm that the following officers are present. Tracy Langley, Chief Operating Officer and Section 151 Officer, Mel O'Sullivan, Service Director for Assurance and Monitoring Officer, Mark Reed, Service Director for Customer and Business Operations, Jessie Hampshire, Service Director for Strategy and Engagement, Ben Rom, Service Director for Operations and Change, Rachel Rotherow, Head of Commercial and Investments, Ellie Wilcox, Head of Financial Planning and Insight, Julie Zesimides, Head of the Library and Information Service, Peter Hockin, Corporate Finance Strategy Manager, Mark Pearce, Team Manager, Commercial and Employment Legal Team, Sharon Hamilton, Shareholder Strategy Policy and Performance Manager, Philip Code, Business Reporting Manager, Sarah Wilson, Policy and Strategy Specialist, Russell Ashman, Head of Pensions, Treasury and Technical, and Ellie Hammersley, Project Manager. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Moving on to the agenda. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Tracy, please.
We've had apologies from Councillor White.
Thank you very much, Tracy. And can I just say that for those members that might not be aware, Councillor White currently has coronavirus. I had an exchange of emails with him yesterday. He's making progress, but I think him and his family have had a difficult time. So my thoughts, and I'm sure the thoughts of the committee, go out to him at this difficult time for him. Agenda item 2, declaration of interest. Any declarations of interest? Okay, item number 3, minutes of the meeting of the 8th of December. Does anyone want to raise an issue in regard to technical accuracy? If so, please put a cross in the box. No crosses that I can see, so if not, I propose that they were correctly recorded. Would the Vice Chairman like to second that, please?
Sorry. Yes, of course I'll second it.
Thank you very much for that. I'll now hand over to Tracy to confirm the proposed vote and conduct the vote by roll call. Tracy, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So the recommendation is that the minutes of the meeting of the Customer and Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on 8th December 2020 were correctly recorded and that they be signed by the Chairman. And that was proposed by Councillor Buscombe, seconded by Councillor Burden. Going to the vote, Councillor Atherfold.
For.
Councillor Barnes.
For.
Councillor Biggs.
Dave Biggs, 4.
Councillor Burden.
4.
Councillor Buscombe.
Councillor Buscombe, 4.
Councillor Eddy.
4.
Councillor Fitter.
Fitter, 4.
Councillor Frost.
4.
Councillor Hawkins.
Hawkins 4.
Councillor Keeling.
Keeling, 4.
Councillor Monk.
4.
Councillor Moorcroft.
4.
Councillor Mould.
Carol Mould 4.
Councillor Saunders.
4.
And I can confirm that that's been carried, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 4, public questions. Are there any public questions today?
No public questions have been received.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 5 on the agenda, information services review. And can I call on Mark Reid, please, to introduce this item? Mark, you there?
Yes, yeah, I am, Chair. Morning, everybody. So I'll just quickly introduce this item and then hand it across to Julie Zessamides, who's going to talk you through the report. So this topic cuts across this scrutiny committee's remit, the customer scrutiny, obviously because this committee holds the ring on the customer strategy for the council. But also we've got the neighbourhood scrutiny committee who look after the library and information service, which is what this is about. So Julie's going to talk to both committees about the short-term model that we are currently operating and proposing, so that customers can continue to get access to our services face to face, and also hopefully open up a discussion about some longer-term thinking. And we welcome the committee's views on that. So I'll hand that across to Julie now to take you through the paper.
Thank you very much, Mark, for that introduction. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Julie Zessamides, Head of the Library and Information Service. So you've all read the report, hopefully, and this is quite a brief verbal update. So early on in the pandemic, indeed as early as last spring, we recognised that there was something missing from our offer. We obviously had closed the doors to our Cornwall Council buildings as a response to government guidelines, but we realised there were a number of people that were in desperate need of face-to-face support. So as a solution through the pandemic, we've introduced what we're calling emergency triage services from our campus buildings, and that is managed by the Library and Information Service staff and a security guard, and that's working reasonably well. We do recognise that we're only having data and evidence of people that are actually presenting themselves at the door, but we've got a good lot of data already around what's happening. And I can tell you that the majority of people that present themselves at the door have actually gone online to start their inquiry or their need for support. So, for example, someone that's made a planning application online has come to the door thinking they can speak to a Cornwall Council officer, but it's safer for them and safer for the staff that they go home and go online to pick up that inquiry. But a small number of people are given access to the building currently through the pandemic, and the team work really closely with them, escalating their concerns and needs to making sure that their needs are met as quickly as possible. So examples of that are as diverse as someone who's a rough sleeper, who has no credit on their phone, has no access to the internet, has no money. So we work with that person to make sure housing respond quickly and they're found shelter. And likewise, it could be, and we have an example of an elderly man that came into Penzance into St John's Hall, who was actually just returning their library books, but he explained that he'd had a stroke, he had no support in place, So he couldn't actually get onto the phone to the contact centre, and he had no way of accessing online, and we just helped him to get his blue badge application sorted. So it's not just people that are in dire need, it could be people that have certain needs at certain times that we're supporting. So we're really aware that we have to protect the staff and the customers currently, and this is what we're proposing to do until the end of lockdown, and indeed until we can come out the other end, really. And the whole point of this paper today is to propose an interim model, and that interim model will be introduced as soon as it's safe to open the doors. And at that point, we're proposing that we will have an open door policy and work with our colleagues in property and who procure the security guards, and working with Jenny Payne's team to actually review through a first year how we can best work with people that truly need support. And we know that a lot of people have the will and desire to get online, but maybe need additional support training, and indeed they might need money to fund buying some kit or indeed broadband. So working with our partners, we know there's real opportunity to actually support a lot of people to go online. And we know from our data and from the data provided by Mark's team that a lot of people are actually phoning the contact centre, or more so going online and not coming outside unless they have to. So as I've said, this review is purely around the customer. It's not about decreasing the offer, it's making sure we do things better moving forward. And I know Mark's team are working really well on improving the website, and we are the face-to-face version of Cornwall Council, and we want to make sure we deliver a quality service for people that truly need it moving forward. So as I've said, we're working really closely with Jenny Payne and property colleagues, but also working closely with external partners. We've got fantastic relationships already with people such as Devon and Cornwall Police, Citizens Advice, Age UK, Volunteer Cornwall, and lots of other organisations, and they're very keen to work with us, and that's through the campus buildings and actually taking our services also into localities and providing promotions, support and information in different locations across the county. So we're trying to create what we're calling Team Cornwall, and this is very much working with our volunteer sector to create a service for everyone, not replication of services as best we can, and making sure we identify where there are pockets of need and pockets of different services available in different areas, and particularly more rurally, socially isolated areas throughout Cornwall. We are aware, I'm sure you all are as well, that post-pandemic there is going to be an increase of people in need and in need of support. And this could be for a variety of reasons, such as homelessness, unemployment, or an increase in mental health, just to name a few. So this is why we don't want to be radical in our approach. We want to have a review year, working really closely with colleagues to see what the art of the possible is. And those options are laid out in your report on pages 16 and 17. So option 10.1 is as before the pandemic. So that's very much an open door service, everyone coming to a traditional reception desk and getting the service they need. Option 10.2 is actually not that different. From the customer's perspective, they won't see a radical change in what we're delivering. There'll still be an open door and they'll still be welcomed. But when they come into the building, we'll work with those people that we can work with to try and support them to try and do it for themselves. And it's very much about them becoming more resilient so that they can actually go do things safely from home. And option 10.3 is a closed door approach. And I know other authorities are looking at this moving forward, so it's something we put down as an option. But our recommendation is 10.2, which is an open door service, once we can open the doors safely, to actually work with partners and customers to see what we can do longer term. And the amendment to today's report is very much around that, and the timeframes a lot. So we've agreed that we need longer to do this. We now recognise that we're in another lockdown and we don't know how soon we will come out of this, that we need a full 12 months to actually review the service. So rather than putting dates against it, and I think initially we were hoping that the doors would open in April and we would bring back a recommendations report for a longer term model for September. We now realise that we have to wait until it's safe to open the doors and then have a full 12 months of review. But what we will do is 6 months into that review, we will bring back a report with some recommendations for you to discuss. So that, in short, is the paper. I've kept it brief. Is there any questions?
Before I invite committee questions, can I just ask Tracy Clark, please, to read out the revised recommendations, because they do differ slightly from those in the written report. So Tracy, could you just, for members' benefit, just read out the revised recommendations, please, or put them up on the screen?
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully you can see that. I can read it out. Are you able to view it, Chairman?
I can view it, yes.
Oh,
If any member can't, perhaps they could put across.
Is that the right one?
I'll read it out anyway. So this is the one that was circulated yesterday to members of the committee. Recommendations that the committee, 1, supports and recommends to the Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Neighbourhoods the preferred interim service model, option 10.2, the public access model, noting the following updates since the report was published. The interim service model will need to be operational for at least 6 months, allowing data on the reasons for residents needing or choosing to visit a council office to be gathered and collated. This data will be required to inform the recommendations for the longer term options. Due to the current restrictions and council buildings remaining closed to the public, the implementation of the interim service model may be delayed, and therefore the recommendations for the longer term service model will be delayed as a result. And recommendation 2, supports and recommends to the Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Neighbourhoods the direction of travel of the longer term options.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Tracy. I now invite members' questions, and the first member to ask a question, Councillor Atherford, please.
Good morning. I think we're probably it's a bit early to be making decisions about where we stand after the pandemic, but page 14, 2/3 of the way down, we're moving towards less face-to-face by encouraging upskilling to go online or use the phone. Well, I have spent the last couple of months trying to get somebody housed, get them fed and watered. How on earth do you think you're going to be upskilling people to go online and use the phone when a lot of the time I can't even get the basics right?
Julie, would you like to respond to that, please?
Yes, I think this response could come from a number of Cornwall Council colleagues, including Mark, but what we're saying is where people have the skills to do their planning application or to look about their waste collections, we're going to help them to do that, but there's always going to be the need for face-to-face support, and that person you've described is a very, is the type of person we want to work with. So it's recognising that we will always need that additional support for people. It's not saying it's not available.
Okay, I'm not quite sure how it's actually going to look. Is it going to be a classroom scenario by upskilling, or if they can't even feed themselves, they haven't got furniture, they can't get online, obviously. I'm not entirely sure how you're going to achieve this. It's an admirable, aim, but I'm not entirely sure how it's practically going to help.
So, Councillor, the type of person you described, we wouldn't be expecting to upskill at that point. We would be there to support them face to face and escalating to the right teams to make sure they get the right support. So we've been dealing with rough sleepers and homeless people throughout the pandemic and making sure if they come to us, they get the right support straight away. So it's the people that have the skills and have the time to be upskilled that we'll be supporting, but people that have real need, we are there for face to face and always will be.
Right, okay, so it's going to be graded in terms of need, okay.
Someone has their hand up, but I can't quite see who it is. I don't know if you want to make yourself known to me.
Councillor Barnes, Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Barnes, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think this is a very good report, but I think we should stick more strictly to the timescales, and I'm also concerned that this could be used by some people to reduce services to the public and to save money in the long term. Some people, the budget comes first and last, and I'm always happy when the public is assisted by our officers, but I won't want it to be used to reduce services.
Julie, would you just like to comment, and then I'll come in and say a couple of things myself. If you'd like to start, please.
Thank you, Chair. In regard to the timescales, we're very keen to make sure we get it right, Councillor Barnes. So giving ourselves time to actually open the doors and work with the residents and work with partners and trial out different models is really imperative to making a decision. So I think we're not putting any dates on the start of this sort of open door review as yet, and I think it's very important we give ourselves 12 months to do that.
Yes, if I could just add that I think it is important to give ourselves time on this with the pandemic, and especially following government announcements last week. I do think it could be a while before we are up and running again and have our doors opened. And I do think we give this a real chance to succeed. I've talked to officers about this, and I think it does both encourage and empower people to go online and be able to do things online, but also there's always got to be that backstop, because I work with tenants and residents on a regular basis, particularly in the field of housing, and it is still important to have face-to-face contact. So I do think this is a really good way of dealing with both issues. I now have Councillor Burden. Councillor Burden, please.
Yeah, thank you. Julie, an odd question to start with. Do our access places charge phones free of charge? Mobile phones?
At the current time, yes. If someone comes in need and all they need is to charge up their phone, we're more than happy to do that. We also have the free Wi-Fi in all of our buildings, which some people are desperate to actually get access to.
Yes, no, I mean, I think you're right about the free Wi-Fi, because I've had moans and groans about that, because and of course printing, especially in A3 or something, when they need to fill out a form. I just think that we got to be very aware of how the public are at the moment, psychologically. We're coming across a lot of people who are down in the dumps, really. And I think that the council needs to be very much there after all these restrictions are lifted, because I think we're going to get a lot of vulnerable and fatigued, really, people who will need help, who can't think straight and all that. And I just think that we've got to have these doors open. The only concern about the doors open, of course, it's only restricted places. And I mean, how are we going to cover those places like North Cornwall where there's nothing at all?
Happy for me to come in, Councillor?
Yes, please, Julia. Yes, okay. Please, yes, thank you.
Thank you. You've touched on something, Councillor Burden, that I forgot to mention, which is that one of our ambitions is to provide more localised support, information and promotions. So that will be done through potentially our offices going out to events and activities, whether that's into local libraries or community centres, and promoting and supporting, working with our partners in more rural areas. And the mobile and micro library review is very much aligned to this information service review, where we've got these fantastic vans and Cornwall Council offices that are going out to communities, and we will be upskilling them to do more support locally as well. Yeah,
going back to the old face-to-face then, and out and about, is it?
The out and about service from North Cornwall, Neil. Councillor Fitter, please. John, are you there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, I read this report with interest, and I just wanted to say, in actual fact, that I was so delighted to see that on 2.8 you were going to create a customer host role, because it does disturb me when we, in this day and age, have to use the word signpost by the security guard, and the word security guard is being mentioned 2 or 3 times in the report, and I think it's not intended to be, but it's a negative word. It implies that there is a threat, and I think that we should reassure in our community that when they come in to use these services, that they're coming into a safe environment. But I congratulate you on the report, and thank you very much indeed. I'm delighted that you're going to get the host people in there. That'd be brilliant. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Biggs, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for the report. I note in section 5, stakeholders, what's been said this morning, I haven't heard any reference to town and parish councils. I raised this because as a former member of Camborne Town Council, I know one of the great bugbears of the town clerk was that more than half the people that walk through the doors of the of the town council offices were really things to do with Cornwall Council, and I'm sure it's vice versa as well. And in the real world, most people do not understand the difference between the parish and town council and Cornwall Council. In a lot of cases, they simply don't recognise the difference. And it seems to me if we don't work with the town and parish councils, we are missing a very important stakeholder. I just wonder what your view on that was.
Totally agree with you on that one. We've got some excellent partnerships already. You're probably aware that 24 of our libraries are managed locally by town and parish councils very successfully, and 12 of those partners also deliver information service support. So they are part of our current working groups, and we're working very closely with them. But as part of the review year, we need to work closer with those other town and parish councils that we're not connected with at the moment.
Yes, thank you.
Any follow-up, Dave? No, okay.
No, Chairman, that's fine. Thank you. No, as long as it's not been forgotten. Thank you.
Carol Mould, Councillor Mould, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I welcome the report and thank you. And also I'd just like to take this opportunity to say to Alan Hampshire and his team the wonderful work they've done around the registration service. They've done a fantastic job in revamping that, and I think this is going a long way to helping this section of our service as well. And I really wouldn't want to see the public locked out from any building, so I welcome the fact that we're not going to have a closed door policy. But I was just interested to read about the financial implications, given that we're looking to invest in more tablets and more computers. Well, hopefully some of the 123 councillors we're dropping to 87. There's 30 we can revamp and reuse, hopefully, and save a bit of money. A bit of housekeeping here would be good in revamping stuff. But generally, I welcome the report, and I do agree with Councillor Biggs that moving forward, you know, the work we do with our town councils and parishes are going to be vital, given the reduction in councillors, and you know, joining hands and all working together, I think moving forward is going to be really important.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mould. I couldn't agree more. Councillor Saunders, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was just the remarks that Councillor Biggs made sort of triggered a thought in my mind. Locally, our community hall is currently closed. It houses the micro library, so that also is out of bounds to residents. The parish council is also the office is closed, so the local avenues that people might have to go in search of information are not available, and I'm finding, because they're sort of, when they come against issues that they can't resolve, they're referring them to me, that a lot of those referrals are coming from social prescribers working with the local GP practices increasingly, and we've got a series of new community larders that are going out to residents that they're assisting with food supplies. So in terms of stakeholders in my community, I would say that the people that are coming face to face with those residents that are in desperate need are in fact the volunteers running the community larders and the social prescribers. So I wondered if there was a mechanism whereby Cornwall Council could endeavour to engage with them and assist them, because as I say, when they come up against a sort of a deficit in their knowledge of how to signpost or assist someone, they're coming to me, and a lot of my casework is coming through those avenues at the moment.
I don't know if you can help Councillor Saunders on that, Julie. Is that something that crosses your desk?
Yes, absolutely. We're keen to work with as many partners as possible, and Ellie Hammersley, the project manager, is on the call, and she's got the task of actually mapping all the local sort of ventures and organisations and what they're doing locally against the need. So we've got a joined up approach of what's available across Cornwall. So please contact us with any names of people that we can be in touch with, Councillor. That'd be really helpful. But you've mentioned your micro library, and we're very keen to explore the art of the possible with the micros and mobiles and make them much more than a collection of books and some access to IT. So they could actually be the heart of communities, working with these other partners as the places people go for support and information. So please be in contact with us, and I'll be delighted to work with you.
Okay, I'm very willing to do that. Thank you, Julie. I would just say on the micro library, obviously the building that houses it currently is closed to the public, so people can't just drop in as they once did. But the same community hall has just made an arrangement with the Citizens Advice Bureau that one morning a week residents can make appointments, virtual appointments, to speak to someone from the Citizens Advice who would be located at the community hall. And maybe there's the possibility of sort of opening up the micro library, at least not the book side of things, but the advice side of things, in the same way. It's there, it's sitting unused, but the need is such that all of these avenues need to be kept open as much as we can possibly make them. So thank you. I will be dropping you an email.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Saunders. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken or asked a question already? Right, Councillor Burden, you have a second question?
Yeah, just a quickie. Well, I was going to ask Mark and Julian and Jenny. I don't know if Jenny's on the call. Is there anything else we can do to strengthen? Because obviously you've heard what members are saying. You know, we want an open door, not a locked door, and we want access for people. Is there, and that's what brings me, Mr. Chairman, to the recommendation. Really, I wonder if the recommendation is reflecting members' opinion, really, and concerns, and because the recommendation looked a bit wordy to me. I don't want to be unkind, but could it be more concise? But I think it's what Julie's been saying about, you know, reviewing and all that. Well, where does that come in? Because it's not in the recommendation.
Okay, Mark, I see just by coincidence, Mark Reed's put a cross in the box. So, Mark, would you like to just respond to Councillor Burden's comments?
Yeah, absolutely.
And to add anything else, of course, that you might think useful for members.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I thought we were coming towards the end, so I was just going to kind of just summarise a bit as well. So for me, you know, this is absolutely in line with the customer philosophy, which obviously the Customer Scrutiny Committee endorsed before Christmas. You know, our strategic approach here is you know, design services around digital, but always to make sure that that people that don't have access to digital still have access to our services. So what Julie, you know, is proposing is absolutely in line there, because there will always be a need to provide, you know, traditional access to those people that need it. So this is absolutely in line with that. And also just linking across all to our digital inclusion strategy as well. You know, so good discussion here about, you know, how we're helping as a council and working with other organisations, trying to help support people get online, how we're providing kit to people. So there is a lot of activity going on under the digital inclusion strategy, which again, I know this committee, you know, you spent time in Dulcoath observing one of the classes when you did the task and finish review. So an awful lot of stuff going on where we're trying to support people, you know, who are looking to go online or aren't sure that would like to. We've got things in place where we're now starting to kind of roll kit out to people who don't have access to kit. And we're looking at connectivity as well. So there's all sorts of discussions and good work going on, which kind of all helps progress this. So this is in line with our previous discussions. And I think just going back to Councillor Burden's question in terms of is there anything else that you can do, and my plea really is you just keep kind of championing this. I think the discussions are good. You know, you're very supportive of what we're trying to do. So I think your continued support is much appreciated. I'm not sure on the actual recommendation. It is possibly a little bit wordy, but maybe I'd look to Tracy to kind of look at, maybe it can be refined a bit, but this is totally in line with what the committee has looked at previously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, the only thing, Mr. Chairman, was that it'll be a new council will be looking at this. Would they understand what we want, what the desires are of the present council, and to make sure they're on the right line?
Okay, well, if you'd like to propose any alteration, Neil, I'll let you think about that. Well, I see that Councillor Fairman, who's listening in today, Councillor Fairman would like to make a comment. Please, Councillor Fairman, go ahead with your comment, please.
Okay, thank you, Richard, and thanks for inviting me along today. Obviously, from Vice Chair of the Neighbours Committee, we take a keen interest in the library service. And also, like Neil, I'm a rural North Cornwall elected member, so I know exactly where he's coming from. So when this came to our committee last week, the members were very keen on the work that the mobile library service has been able to do during the pandemic, and very keen to see that expanded on. So, you know, we have recommended last week that a review of both the micro and mobile libraries is undertaken with a certain amount of restructuring. We feel there's more could be done by the mobile service. Well, I mean, it's not just us, but that was how it was presented to us, and we're very supportive of that. And overall, we see that the commitment to offering face-to-face contact to residents should be reflected entirely when these services are reviewed. So we're 100% behind the comments your councillors have made, and our recommendations, I think, will chime very well with yours.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Dominic. Yes, it was remiss of me not to mention that these matters were discussed last week at Neighbourhoods, and you kindly and Karen very kindly invited Neil and I to attend. And I do think this is an excellent piece of work. And to Councillor Burden's comment about the new council, yes, I hope that you know, many councillors that are members now will come back after the elections in May, and I would you know, encourage them to you know, pursue this, because I think it's excellent for both you know, urban areas but also rural areas as well, which I would say I represent too. So I fully support this report. I think it's excellent, and I commend you know, Julie and her team for what they've done in what is a very difficult time for us. Now, unless anyone else has got any comments, I think I would like to move to the recommendations now. And now Tracy Clark has put them on the screen and read them. If there's anyone that would like to you know, make any amendment in any way, you know, please come forward. I'll give you give members a short while to think about that. And if we don't have any amendments, then I will propose these recommendations as they stand. I think they're a very good basis for us going forward into the future. So I'm happy, unless anyone has a slightly different form of words, I'm happy to support those recommendations. And yes, Tracy's put them up in front of us again.
And Mark has added something, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, right.
In the chat box.
Sorry. Yes, so Mark, is that added to recommendation 1, or is that a recommendation 3? What's your thinking on that?
I just think somewhere, Chair, it's probably worth adding in, because obviously the council, the customer philosophy has been adopted for the council, and that will continue into the new administration. So I think it's probably worth referencing it. I'm just reading the recommendation now. Yeah, it's probably within the first one. somewhere if Tracy could kind of craft it in somehow.
That's brilliant.
Tracy Clark, could you add those words somewhere appropriately, if not at the end?
Okay, let's have a look.
Right in the middle, wouldn't it?
We could make that just a separate recommendation too, if members are minded to. So leave in recommendations, leave recommendation 1 as it is, add in a separate recommendation 2, that the future design of the service should be in line with the principles within the council's customer philosophy, and then make recommendation 2 that's up on the screen, recommendation 3.
Yes, just speaking, you know, as a councillor, I think I would prefer that, because I think there's enough in recommendation 1 as it currently stands. So I wouldn't want Mark's words to be sort of lost in that first recommendation. So I think I would prefer Tracy's suggestion. Councillor Keeling, you've got a cross in the box.
Yeah, I think it should stand alone. It would get lost in that first recommendation. And Mr. Chairman, I think the direction of travel is spot on with this, and I would like to second your approval.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Keeling, for that. I'll just let Tracy is just adding that second recommendation.
Is that, I don't know if that's what members are happy with, Chairman. They're your recommendations.
Yes, so members, are we happy with the new recommendation number 2?
Have we got to leave out, can't we leave out believes that any future design?
Okay, so that any future design, yeah.
It looks okay to me as seconder.
Thank you very much, members. So I'll now hand over to the Democratic. Councillor Biggs, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I understand why people are enthusiastic to add the second recommendation, but from a logical point of view, how could the future design of the service not be in line with the council's customer philosophy? I don't see how that. To me, I think you're overstating the case. I don't think you actually need to say it at all.
Right. Okay. Comments from anyone?
Dave, I just think we're thinking of the new council, really.
Well, Neil, I assume that you think that the new council are going to be a bunch of idiots that can't actually understand logic. I know why people are saying this, but I think you're just overstating it. And we already have a very wordy number 1 recommendation, which I don't like, I have to say, as a recommendation. It doesn't look particularly cogent and concise to me. I think we're all on board with this. I don't think you need to overstate the case. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, I'll just take a couple of other views. Councillor Barnes. Councillor Barnes, you there?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think we're back to the too many cooks spoiling the broth. We're all generally in favour of this. We all want to rewrite it in a form of words that we would originally write. So I think what we've got is good enough. Let's go to the vote.
Right.
Or should we just start the meeting all over again?
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Fitter.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree entirely with Councillor Barnes. I think, you know, we can micromanage this till the chickens come home or whoever comes home. I feel that we should now get on and take the vote. I'm content as it is on the screen. Thank you, sir.
Right. Okay, Councillor Monk quickly, and then I'm going to go to the vote because we got a recommendation proposed by myself and seconded by Councillor Keating. Councillor Monk, just quickly, please.
Yeah, just total agreement with Councillor Barnes and Councillor Fitter.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've got a recommendation that we support the recommendations as on the screen. I'm handing over to the Democratic Services Office now to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to double check, was it Councillor Burden who proposed these recommendations originally?
No, it's myself and Councillor Keating.
That's right. Okay, lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I lost track there. Okay, so proposed by Councillor Buscombe and seconded by Councillor Keeling, recommendations that the committee supports and recommends to the Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Neighbourhoods the preferred interim service model, option 10.2, the public access model, noting the following update since the report was published. The interim service model will need to be operational for at least 6 months, allowing data on the reasons for residents needing or choosing to visit a council office to be gathered and collated. This data will be required to inform the recommendations for the longer term options. Due to the current restrictions and council buildings remaining closed to the public, the implementation of the interim service model may be delayed, and therefore the recommendations for the longer term service model will be delayed as a result. Recommendation 2 supports that the future design of the service should be in line with the principles within the council's customer philosophy. Recommendation 3 supports and recommends to the Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Neighbourhoods the direction of travel of the longer term options. So if we could go to the vote then please. Councillor Atherfold.
Councillor Atherfold, 4.
Councillor Barnes.
4.
Councillor Biggs.
Dave Biggs, 4.
Councillor Burden.
4.
Councillor Buscombe.
4.
Councillor Eddy.
4.
Councillor Fitter.
Fitter, 4.
Councillor Frost.
Councillor Frost, 4.
Councillor Hawkins.
Hawkins 4.
Councillor Keeling.
Keeling 4.
Councillor Monk.
4.
Councillor Moorcroft.
Moorcroft, 4.
Councillor Mould.
Carol Mould 4.
And Councillor Saunders.
Councillor Saunders 4.
I can confirm that that's been carried, Chairman, unanimously.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that, members, and to Julie and her team, please carry on your good work.
Thank you very much. Bye for now.
Okay, members, moving on, if we could please, to item number 6, which is the budget 2021-22 and the medium-term financial plan 2021 to 25. Before handing over to Tracy Langley, I'd just like to make a comment of my own, if I could, please. I think all of us councillors and all of us that take an interest in local government, throughout the country, can't help but understand that this has been an incredibly difficult year for local authorities, and I commend the work of our team, of our Treasury team under Tracy Langley. I think they've done an excellent job to get us where we are today. They've also kept us fully informed, throughout the process. We've had a number of briefings, since September, whether or not that's been all member briefings or scrutiny committee joint briefings, and I understand there have been, briefings to political groups as well. So I think we've been fully informed. It's been a very difficult year, and I know this is somewhat unusual, but I'm going to read out the names of the officers that have done such a great job in getting this authority to where it is today, as far as its budget is concerned. So Tracy Langley, lead officer; Russell Ashman, Pete Hocking, Will Tarrant, Tracy Stephanie, Gareth Rees, Sarah Acton Payne, Phil Code, Abby Edwards, and also with support from Rachel Rotherow, Patrick Weir and Rosie Royal. Now, I know it's unusual to do that, but I do think that they've done an excellent job, and we as members should acknowledge that. So with no further ado from myself, I'm going to hand over to Tracy now to take us through this report, which was sent under separate cover to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for your kind words. Your officers have worked so hard this year, as you know, and they will be really grateful for those words. You have the report in front of you, and the nature of this report is that in effect the same front end of this report has been delivered to all of the overview and scrutiny committees, so it's no different from the others. And then in the second half of the report are the details for the budgets for your own area. Slightly differently in here as well, we have the capital requirements, because as CASOST you are required to have a look at the capital requirements as well, and we have Russell who's going to go through that with you. And then there is also a part around how receiving the recommendations that have been made from the other overview and scrutinies on the budget, so that you can consider those in your response as well. So I hope that's okay. So I'm going to go really quickly through the summary of the report, because you know and have heard all about this before, and it's no different than what you've already seen. So a really hard year to be trying to manage the budget, but we have managed to balance the budget for 21-22, and although there is still a gap in the future years of the medium-term financial plan, the transformation programme that we have in place will have a blueprint to deal with that over the coming years. The budget gap that we recognised in September is still the same, so 36.3 million for 21-22. And what we've tried to do is to put savings in place and manage that gap, whilst minimising as much as possible the impact on residents as much as we possibly can. But of course, it is a massive financial challenge for us, and something that all other authorities are really struggling with. And it is, as you will see in the budget, the thing that we won't have seen before is that in order to balance the budget, and especially around adult social care spending, we have applied a 3% adult social care preset in 21-22 to manage some of the pressures that we're finding in adult social care. That is, as well as a 1.99% council tax increase, which is the required, the amount that is less than the need for triggering a referendum. So in total, a 4.99% increase in 21-22. For the future years of the MTFP, we've added 1.99%. You know all about our new financial strategy, where we're trying to make sure that the budget is as accurate as it possibly can be moving into the future years of the medium-term financial plan. And we've called that right sizing. And by right sizing, what we mean is getting rid of all of the anomalies and making sure our income budgets are right, so that by the time we get to the point where we're doing the transformational work, we have accurate budgets in place to move around. I have set a level of reserves at 35 million for the budget. However, the risks are really high this year, and the level of reserves in the general fund is a factor of how much risk we're carrying. So you might see that going up a little bit in the final budget meetings. You will also remember that I've asked members to consider that if they want to put in a growth proposal of any sort, then it has to come with an equal or an opposite saving. Otherwise, we just have more pressures to try and manage. In the medium-term financial plan in Table 1, you can see how we've tried to mitigate the gap, and those are the details. So mostly we have revised some funding assumptions because we've had some more information from the government. We've managed to do some technical adjustments, which we're always able to do, but that just means using the money that we have available through capital and revenue to work through some of that. There are the savings templates that you have already seen, and the benefits realisation templates will have the detail of all of those savings. And then there's a small, there are a small number of growth items, but fundamentally adult social service demand has gone up significantly this year as a result of COVID, and we're expecting those bulges to keep going. And the problem that we have, and of the risks that we face, is how we're actually going to fund those in the future, because COVID has accelerated some of those people coming into care. We have some one-off mitigations as well, which we've been able to do because of some changes to some of the grants. That was all I was going to say on the main part of the budget. You will see that I'm trying to whip down. Chair, I don't know whether you want any of the officers to go into any of the detail at that point, but I wondered if you wanted to stop here and ask the question.
Thank you very much for that, Tracy. Yes, members, any questions on what Tracy has put before us so far? If anyone would like to put a cross on the box, please. If not, we can. Yes, okay. Councillor Atherfold, please.
I'm not entirely sure it comes across as of what you've spoken about before, but in our early morning meeting this morning, we talked about savings that the council have made during lockdown, and the example they used was photocopying, the saving in photocopying. I'm guessing those savings are across the board in all departments, and I'm just wondering if you've got some rough idea in your head of what that figure might be.
Councillor Atherfold, I haven't got them off the top of my head. So there are a number of savings that we will have made by not commuting and not printing. So those are all for the good, actually, because they link in with our zero carbon targets. However, what I would say is that the amount of money that you think that you would save in buildings is not as high, because actually we still need to keep some of the buildings open, and the bigger ones are the ones that cost the money in effect. So, but I will get that figure for you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it will be substantial, and I'm just thinking it's got to have an impact somewhere in your budgeting ideas. But if you could, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Councillor Keeling, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. I was just looking at the indicative service totals in Appendix 1, and I note also that we've got a 30 million impact of COVID, which is reducing our normal income levels, and also a £21 million increase in adult social care. But when I look at the figures in the column, it doesn't seem to reflect that. They seem to be pretty much the same for 21-22 as they do for 20-21. Maybe I'm being a bit thick here, Tracy, but could somebody actually give me some idea of why the 30 million and the 21 million respectively are not actually or don't seem to be in those tables?
Yeah. So let me. So they're two separate things. So the 21 million is the amount of additional cost in adult social care that we think is going to come through in 2021-22. That has been offset by required savings of 10 million, which is captured in the 16.6 million of savings in the table. And therefore the balance of that is 11 million, which is the growth item in that table. So that is the adult social care piece. The amount of income lost through COVID is a sort of it's a general figure of the loss of income, and it's probably more than that by now, to be honest. But that has been covered largely by COVID grants, but they're one-off grants. And the reason why it doesn't have an impact into the budget is because in this year the loss is covered by a COVID grant, and we anticipate that once we get back out of lockdown and into normality, the income generated, which is largely through car parks and some fees and charges, will continue as normal.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I was just wondering why the adult social care column looked pretty much the same as it did last year. That's all.
Yeah, we're trying to contain the growth by putting intervention plans in place. Because otherwise,
are we getting grants?
Sorry.
Okay, are we getting grants for loss of income? We are getting 75% of income loss, are we not?
Yeah, we are. So we have to put in claims against an income loss scheme, and we get effectively 75% of that back.
There is another question on the. It's got the Highways Capital Grant BRR pilot, 26.61 million. I'm not really sure what that means. Has that come from capital, or is it something? I'm not sure what that means at all, actually.
Ellie, are you on?
No, Ellie's not on.
Oh, isn't she not? Russell, do you want to answer that technically?
Yeah, I will do. Councillor Keeling, this is relating to the 100% business rate retention scheme that the council is piloting. As part of that, the capital grants that would normally flow to the council to fund highway maintenance and some of the highway and transport improvements are wrapped into that arrangement. Therefore, rather than have a grant, we now use business rate money to fund those activities. The vast majority is capital.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm also pleased to see that there's nearly 8 million put into highway maintenance, something that we really need. The other thing is members' allowances. Is there going to be a bit more of a saving now on that?
Yes, Councillor Keeling, there is a little bit more of a saving due to the recommendations that you agreed the other day. I am still working out how we show that.
Okay, thank you very much, Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Keeling. Now moving on to Councillor Barnes.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm sure the public, when they look at these council meetings, will say that we're down 30 million. Why doesn't the government make up that difference? And just thinking about what Councillor Keeling said, well, now we're cutting down to 87 councillors. Well, perhaps the cabinet should do the same. You know, go from 8 to 7, and perhaps get rid of the post of deputy leader. That might save a bit of money. And but I think the public must be looking at this and thinking, how on earth can a council just lose £30 million overnight? And I'm sure it's not that simple, but that's probably what the public will think, is that somehow the council lost 30 million, probably because of COVID. All the other firms can put in for money. Why doesn't the council put in to get some of that £30 million back from the government?
Councillor Barnes, if I can answer that, thank you. So the 30 million is mostly lost income from car parks during the lockdowns. So overnight, people won't have been going to the car parks, and the charges were lifted. So all of that income didn't come in. We have been there has been a scheme that we could apply to get most of that money back, and we have done that.
So how much have we got back then?
Off the top of my head, Councillor Barnes, I can't remember, but I will make sure that I get that to you. But the income loss scheme allows us to reclaim 75% of our loss in total. But there are some fees and charges as well that we've also lost the income from.
So now that the council decided to open the car parks again to the public for free, are we going to be reclaiming that from the government as well?
I think all loss, while the scheme applies, we can apply. So we will be applying for that lost income, regardless of why we've lost it, because the scheme is there for us to do that.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Rushworth, I've got you logged, but I'm going to go to Councillor Mould and then Councillor Fitter, simply because if we were having this meeting down in the Trelawney room, I would go to my committee members first and then have other members afterwards. So I've got you in my sights, but I'm going to move to Councillor Mould now.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Tracy. I always ask you this because I always have a particular concern about people that live in my division that live on a fixed income and struggle whenever the council tax goes up, and it always bothers me that, you know, I quite understand we do put it up, but it's the correlation between putting it up and the people that we push then into council tax poverty and looking for relief. I know you do your sums and I know you do them well, but I always ask it because it always bothers me.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mould, and we're really aware of that. And I've been asked to make some money available to support a council tax support scheme, and we're just working through the scheme now. However, what that will do, it will provide additional resources available to those who are in hardship of any sort on council tax payments for them to have access to. We are looking at around about 3 million for that to happen.
It's always a toss-up, isn't it? Because at what point does that start putting pressure on a budget that you're raising money to cover? It's just a tough conundrum, isn't it, to deal with? Okay, that's lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fitter, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tracy, yeah, just a couple of quick questions, and they're very small in the overall spectre of things. But do you expect any? Have you sort of got a provisional sum in that you will have to find to cover the meeting of the heads of state at St Ives? Is there anything in the ballpark, or is all that funding that Cornwall Council may have to provide provided and reinforced from central government? And the second thing is, are you expecting to have to find the £5 million that you very kindly made available to sort of help to protect the airport? I appreciate it won't have all been used yet, but the original sum was, I believe, 10 million for the spaceport. And are you expected to have to find that 5 million and replace it in the pot? If not for the coming years, certainly for 22-23. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Councillor Fitter, the provisional amount for St Ives, was that linked to the Towns deal?
Yeah, no, I was thinking of the summit of heads of state. Will Cornwall Council themselves have to provide, I suspect, even if it's to buy a gift for the visiting heads of state? And I just wondered if you had a provisional sum that you would identify that you may need to provide.
Yeah, thank you. The amount of resources that we need in order to support the G7 summit is being provided to us from the government. I think if we want to do some local things to support our local businesses, we may well need to put some money aside for that, but we haven't worked on that yet, and I haven't been asked to make a provision. On the second thing around the 5 million made available to protect the airport, the provision has been made, and we had to make the provision in order for the company to remain solvent, but they have not drawn down that provision yet. But the provision is still there. If it is drawn down, we will have to put the money back in for Spaceport, but in a future year. When Spaceport need that, it's a bit of using some of that funding that we've got put by this year, but we will need to put it back.
Fantastic. Thanks very much indeed, Tracy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bowden, please.
It's just quickly, Tracy, really. Members, Tracy Clark sent out what the other scrutiny committees had recommended when they went through the budget. But I think what's the most frightening thing is the 200 million for social care. And I just think it's a frightening figure. And everybody who pays council tax will be contributing about £1,000 towards it. I suppose we are where we are, but I think publicity needs to be made of that so that the public, you know, the times people say to me, well, what do you spend my council tax on? Well, that is a very good example because they assume it's spent on something that's wasted. But the other thing is, are we reviewing assessments really? Because I think that there seems to be very strange assessments. Some seem to get a gold-plated one, and some people seem to get one visit a day when they really need 4. You know, and I just wonder how we are actually managing that now?
Thank you, Councillor Burden. Yes, you're absolutely right. A significant amount of our revenue budget gets spent on care, and that's not only on adult social care, which is 200 million. It is also on the care of our children and young people. A very significant proportion of our revenue budget, which is one of the reasons why, because the costs of those rise every year above inflation and more than the money, the income that we have coming in. It's why we continue to have to make savings to pay for that. In terms of reviewing assessments, you will know, Councillor Burden, that there is a significant amount of work happening in adult social care, not only to bring costs back under control, but also to make sure that the processes are consistent and we are able to capture all of the sort of best practice ways of doing things in adult social care. But you know, that doesn't happen overnight because it's a huge service.
Thank you.
I'm going back to Councillor Rushworth now, please. Councillor Rushworth.
Thank you, Chairman, and I understand why you left me till last. Not offended in any way. My question is to Tracy, really, and it's really one of reassurance. The 7,987,000 coming from reserves to be able to maintain our highways for the next year, which is coming from reserves. Does that give us enough cover if we do get a major incident like Coverack or maybe bigger? There's lots of, you know, that we're getting more and more rain, and that's probably going to happen for a few more years. So there is a chance that we could get a major route that slips down the side of a hill or something. Does this affect our ability to be able to act quickly if something like that happens? And how are we going to? Is that money going to be paid back in the next financial year on top of the maintenance highways, or will it come from other directorships as well?
Thank you, Councillor Rushworth. The money that you're talking about on highways is a bit of a mechanism that we're using, a sort of technical adjustment that we're using this year in order to release out some revenue funding. So we will need to backfill that again next year, and that's already captured in our medium-term financial plan. So yes, we will need to find the revenue in order to put that back in next year. In terms of the risk of a major incident, one of the reasons, one of the technical things that we do when we're setting a general reserves level is that we look at all of the risks that we are carrying at any one time. So we make an assessment of whether or not the risk of major incidents like Coverack would ever happen again. And you're absolutely right. I think that because of the amount of rain which is increasing, actually our risk goes up, but I capture that within the reserves list risk level. So if something like Coverack did happen again, that is exactly what our reserves are for. So yes, they are covered.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Monk.
Hi, Tracy. Just a quick one, really. It's on page 20, and I guess it's following on from what Stephen was just saying about the revenue increase in the transport growth. I don't quite understand. It's in item 3. It says capital finance, increase capital finance to budget for support committed borrowing levels, and it sort of adds up to about £5 million. What are those figures for there?
I've got Russell, and Russell will be able to do the detail of that. But in effect, what we're doing is we are that's the 8 million for highways is already in the budget, but we pay for it through revenue. And in order to release out revenue, what we're doing for 1 year is we're backing that into a loan and then bringing it back in next year. So it just releases out revenue for this year.
What's it? Is it a loan from who to who, and for what?
So that's a borrowed amount. But Russell, are you there? Can you confirm that?
Yes, it is as you, Tracy, clearly set out a funding switch that there is an element of revenue that we were using to fund capital. We're going to use the revenue to help balance the revenue budget, and then the element that is capital will feed into the potential borrowing for the council, which we'll borrow from wherever we borrow our potential borrowing at that point in time, either PWLB or whatever other options are actually there on the market at that point.
Okay, so it's not for a specific project, it's just for everything.
Yes. Yes, we don't borrow for specific projects. We borrow in total to fund the council's total potential borrowing position.
Okay, thank you.
So from a technical perspective, Councillor Monk, one of the things that we do in Treasury Management is we're always trying to manage the amount of revenue that we have and the amount of capital that we need to borrow. So it's a sort of everyday mechanism that we do in order to make sure that we've got enough money to pay for everything that we need to do.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks.
Councillor Biggs, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I wonder if Stanley could answer this one in regards to the amount of reserves. Is the amount of reserves calculated on the basis of the net revenue budget or the gross revenue budget? My understanding was from earlier in this council, we were looking for reserves of about 40 to 42 million on the basis of the revenue budget, the net revenue budget, not the gross one. Which one is it, please?
Net revenue, I would say. However, it is a judgment call based on the risks that we are carrying. So we kind of start at that level, and then we move it around dependent on the amount of risk that we're carrying. I hope that's right, Russell.
Yeah, I'm just going to come in there, Tracy. Yeah, the days gone some years ago when your general fund was treated as a percentage of your net budget. We've moved on from there. The way the general fund is calculated now is based on a risk-based approach. We look at all the risks, as we've already mentioned earlier, i.e., maybe a severe weather event, etc. All those risks are then built into a calculation about probability, etc., to give us an idea of what level of general reserve we should carry, and that is how we actually arrive at that figure, rather than just a flat percentage of our net revenue budget.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. If I could come back, that's thank you very much for that. It does seem curious, however, that we have a lower percentage of reserves now against an overall gross revenue budget and increased risks than we had against the net revenue budget. It seems that we're taking more risk now than perhaps we did before. Is that right?
I would say not, Councillor Biggs, because we recognise all of the risks that we're carrying out in our finances at any one time, rather than it being a straight amount of money on a kind of a notional amount. We know what risks we're carrying. We do quite extensive bits of analysis across the organisation to work out what those risks are, and then the amount of money in reserves is based on those risks. So we wouldn't expect in any one year for all of those risks to come to fruition by any means, but some of them might. But we know that we've always got the amount of money based on those risks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Biggs. Now, I have no more crosses in the box, Tracy, so would you like to carry on to the next section of your report, which I guess is around the CASOS budget itself, if you know what I mean? Thank you.
CASOS budget itself. So I was not going, I have the officers here who are who lead all of these budgets, and I just wonder whether or not it would be helpful if each of them just went very quickly through their own budgets. Would that be helpful?
Yes, I think it would. Yes, if they could do that, please, that would be helpful.
Great, thank you very much. So the first one up is Assurance and Monitoring Officer. Mel, are you here?
I said.
Oh,
Leanne, so just for the benefit of the public, so my name is Melanie O'Sullivan, Service Director for Assurance and Monitoring Officer. So members, you would have seen the budget position for assurance is set out on page 15. And in terms of savings around the MTFP, we have delivered our cash transformation savings, which you'll see in the appendix around the savings plans. And I think from recollection, it's about £307,000 referred to in there. I can't flip between the two screens at this point in time. So we worked hard to deliver that saving across internal audit, fraud, risk and assurance, legal services and democratic services. And many members will be aware we're about to go out for consultation on our democratic services redesign this week. So we're delivering those savings through our cash transformation programme. And then in addition to that, members, as has been referred to today, we do have the saving in relation to the members' allowance scheme. And I am aware that the decision was made in relation to the council meeting around that, and that created a higher figure than was in the proposed MTFP. However, members, we're not proposing at this stage to include that as an additional savings requirement in the MTFP, and the reason for that basis is the risks in relation to that saving going forward. So I will say, being responsible for the elections, that the elections is proceeding. Members, if you could just give me 1 second, I do apologise. Sorry for that, about that, members. So the members' allowance, the MTFP saving will remain the same, and this is given the uncertainties in relation to the proposed election going forward, and also when that review will be undertaken. So we cannot confirm the exact amount of saving based on the council decision that was made. In addition to that, to that point, we also want to put aside some provision to support the implementation of hybrid meetings. So members should be aware through your group leaders that we've been asked to support the provision of hybrid meetings going forward, and we do need some funded provision to support that going forward into the future. So it's recognising those two elements in relation to that savings programme. So I think, Tracy, that those are the main points that I will make around assurance. If any members have got any questions or comments in relation to that, then I'm happy to take them.
Questions for Melanie, please? Any questions? Cross on the box. Okay, I think that's no questions from Melanie. So can we move on, Tracy, to the next member of staff?
Thank you very much. We have Ops and Change, and that's Ben Rom.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Ben Rom. I'm a Service Director for Operations and Change. So the budget we have in front of us is driven a lot next year by some of the contractual inflation that we have around our property and IS, particularly as you'll be aware, in the last year you'll move to supporting a lot of remote working and meeting as we do now, and that drives up some of our some costs around IT infrastructure and contracts and licenses. So there's some demand next year. Over the last year, we've delivered quite a lot of transformation within the services, within Operations and Change. That includes the human resources team, the property team, the IT team, and the project management team as well. And so within there, we've made some transformations within the HR service and the property service. And next year we'll be making some more adjustments and making sure we can keep within the budget. But most of what we've got in front of us for next year is driven by some of those demands that I've already laid out. And while we do that, of course, they're also the services that are really fundamental to supporting the change in the rest of the organisation. So we continue to look to do that as effectively and as efficiently as we possibly can do. But I haven't got anything. If anyone's got any questions, happy to take them.
Questions for Ben? Any questions for Ben Rom?
Chair, could I ask?
Yes, sorry, we've got Councillor Byrne now. Councillor Byrne.
Yeah, just to ask Ben about the Oracle license. Surely that's an annual affair, isn't it? It's not just a one-off.
It's not just a one-off. There are Oracle, as we've moved to our new Oracle system. Previously, it was hosted on servers within council premises. Now it's a cloud-based service, so that is ongoing. But that's an adjustment. You'll recall we went live with that new system earlier in the financial year. So that's an adjustment to make sure we've got the right licenses in the right place to support everything we need to do on that system.
Yeah, but what you haven't done is put what it will be the year after and the year after.
Yeah, that's partly an adjustment to make sure that so there's already cost for Oracle in the base budget, but we need an adjustment to make sure we've got
so
right license.
Where do we see the total license fee then?
We wouldn't see that in this level of detail, but I can certainly dig that out for you, Councillor Burden. And
Just for general information for members, really. Yeah, that's all right. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Eddy, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to ask Ben around the pay inflation. How does that so how does that increase year on year then, Rom? Ben, is that simply contract?
Yeah, so there's some overall assumptions around what the pay inflation will be, and then they're sort of organisational wide assumptions, not just within the operations and change team. So it's then applied to the that assumption rate is then applied to whatever your staffing budget looks like. Hence why you see those changes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, it does. It does. You hear the word pay freeze mentioned now and then, but that doesn't reflect in those figures, does it? So
there's an adjustment for that.
Councillor, it does. So there's an adjustment in there across all of the council's budgets for the decision that was made to take the pay freeze. So you'll see those in the red figures.
Thank you.
Councillor John Keeling.
Yeah, just a quick one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're all working from home just now, and I'm wondering if the costs that there are savings there, are reflected in your table, in your ops and change table there on that page. Obviously we're not travelling as much. We're not asking for expenses, etc. So I'm just wondering if it is reflected in that particular columns or anywhere in your service area.
There are some savings in terms of business travel costs within my area. That's actually not great in the first instance. So the quantum that we're pulling from isn't vast. Most of the I think as we go forward, this way of working and as people work in more I wouldn't say necessarily at home, but in more varied areas and less reliant on an office desk space, that's where we'll see some of those savings coming through. What we probably have actually seen in the short term overall is a small increase in some of those costs because the technology that we're using to have this conversation requires additional support. I think prior to lockdown, we had about a maximum of about 700 people ever dialing in at one time. Now we've got about 7,000 a day. So those infrastructure costs are actually affecting us. But I think overall there is less business travel, but it's not taken from it wasn't particularly big anyway. We'd worked really, really hard to reduce that wherever we could. So it's a diminishing of a small pot.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Keeling. Any more questions for Ben before we move on? No. Okay, Tracy, the next director, please.
It's my service. It's the finance and commercial service. I don't know, Russell, do you want to do this one? Save me talking more.
Yeah, I can briefly. I think it's a fairly simple one. Obviously, the service it is primarily staff. You'll see that the savings have been built in there from the pay freeze and savings that we have freed up from a number of posts either that have been made redundant through the latest redundancy process or that are vacant and we decided that we are not going to replace them. There are obviously some savings built in at the moment from the commercial perspective in terms of savings which will be across the organisation in terms of the commissioning and we will need to work with the rest of the organisation for those cross-cutting savings to be delivered.
Thank you, Russell.
Any questions for Russell? Members, any questions for Russell?
Can I? Yes.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry, I'm struggling. Yeah. I just how are we going to curtail this vision of spending on capital projects? Because I think the whole world's going to enter a very strange period now for several years, and we seem to be still very keen on spending a lot of money and committing ourselves. Shall I say committing ourselves? And there's no guarantee of any return, whatever. And I just wonder how we're going to curtail the cabinet's enthusiasm. Shall I put it that way? Because it seems to be just every time we have a meeting, there's more capital spend. And I just think that, anybody, we all have to curtail sometimes, and I just think this time the council did, and I just wonder how that's going to be managed, really.
Perhaps if I start, Russell, you can do the detail of that. So I think, Councillor Burden, it is not for us to curtail or make comment about what cabinet wants to spend the money on. What I will say is that this is a very, very big council, and it does a lot of works that is funded externally. So it's not only our own internal infrastructure work that we do, it's external work as well. But I'll leave Russell to answer the question technically.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, the further up in the report, there is an element about the capital strategy, and you will see actually the proposal that is going forward for the budget and the MTFP in February is that actually we do not add capital asks to the programme at the moment. The programme is already sizable. There will be a couple of schemes either amended or added because of government grant coming in, or they're sort of semi-external, i.e. the Tamar Bridge and Tor Point Ferry and the HRA, where they will be adding in their 4th year of their programme, but we're not anticipating adding any of the current capital asks. We've got capital asks not included in the programme, if you look in the report, totaling some £1.5 to £1.7 billion. And yes, they are not going to be added in. They're going to go through a process of approval, which will look at whether they are, how they fit against the council's priorities and how deliverable they are, and how do they prioritise against what's already in the existing programme, because obviously with the existing programme at 1.2 to 1.3 billion with a further 1.7, that is a significant sum, and we need to look at how do we prioritise the existing and the new asks in one go, and that is the proposal in the capital strategy for the change in the process that we are proposing this year.
I mean, to give you credit, really, the first line was, I underlined it in red. To deliver a programme of this size is a significant challenge, and I just think that I just wonder how, I mean, if everything was hunky-dory, then it may be okay, but I think we need caution, and then we always know, and I mean, from my experience of being in a local authority for a long time, there are delays in projects. There is cost overruns, and that is the game that we're always used to. So I am concerned, and I just hope that people will curb their enthusiasm. Shall I put it that way? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Baston, please. Councillor Baston, welcome to our committee. Please ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't really aware I'd had a hand up, or.
I've got you as a cross in the box, so.
Right. Oh, sorry. I think that was left over from the very beginning when I was talking to Debbie. So apologies for that.
Oh, is there anything you want to mention, Councillor Baston?
No, it's fine. It's very interesting, actually. What you know, replaying some of the things we've talked about earlier last week, but it's very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if there are no more questions for Russell, we'll move on to the next section, please, Tracy.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We have strategy engagement. Jessie, are you here? It's a very simple one for strategy and engagement.
Yes, I am, Tracy. Thank you. So yeah, as members will see at paragraph 5.15, you have our plans for the year ahead and the MTFP set out there. Members will recall that over the last 3 years of this MTFP, we've been focused on driving savings out of our print service, and a lot of work has gone into making that self-financing, where previously it was running at around £250,000 deficit. We've kind of maxed out the income potential there, and so the savings, which are ongoing reductions to the services total for future, are being met through people. And you'll see the proposals for next year are being achieved through reducing our head of service complement from 3 to 2. So quite simple, but happy to take any questions that members have on that.
Any questions for Jessie, please? Anything? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Oh no, Councillor Atherton. Councillor Atherton.
Yeah, could you just expand on what you mean focusing on print services?
Yeah, so when I joined the council back in 2017, the print service had just moved into strategy and engagement, and it had been on quite a long journey. It had been 2P'd out under the BT project and then rejoined the council, and I think it had just been missing some TLC for quite a long time, so it was it wasn't recovering its costs in terms of print work. So we carried out a bit of an estate rationalisation programme. So we went from 3 print rooms to 1, which is up at 3 Milestone. We carried out a bit of a review of the staffing because it was operating well under capacity, and we halved the workforce through a voluntary redundancy opportunity, and we also reviewed the operation of the service through a lean review to make sure that it was making really efficient use of its kind of resources, which is paper, materials, that kind of thing, and also had was marketing its offer really well. That's done on the basis. So what we commit to is that we will only do print work in-house if we can do it at least 10% cheaper than the market, the lowest market rate. And if we can't do it at least 10% cheaper than the lowest market rate, we put it out to the market. So that means that we can be sure that services across the council are getting the best value for money print work that's possible, and through a combination of those 3 approaches, we've moved from a position where it was running at requiring a kind of £250,000 supplement from base budget to one where it's self-financing.
Can I go back to my previous question at the beginning?
Yeah, please do.
What have we saved during lockdown in printing costs?
So the service that sits within strategy and engagement is not, we're not responsible for the MTFD, sorry, the multifunctional devices. So all the printers that you'll see around the office floors in New County Hall and our other offices. The reductions there have been very substantial. The overall print strategy is to continue driving down the use of those devices in the office, and the budget sets a target for I think it's a 35% reduction. I'd have to check, because as I say, this isn't within my service's responsibility, which has associated quite significant cost savings, but also carbon savings. What we're expecting is that as we bear down on the overall print through the use of office devices, that we will see sustained and possibly increased use of the print room at 3 Milestone, which is where we do need to have materials kind of sent out to local residents, such as council tax bills or the adult education budget, etc. That those are still done through that in-house print room, where that offers best value for money.
Ben, do you want to add to this discussion, please?
If I could, Chair, that's really helpful. Thank you. So the multifunction devices are part of the responsibility of our IT service. So we put those out in different offices, and the costs are then seen within that. And through the beginning part of lockdown, or since the beginning of the financial year, we've seen about £300,000 reduction of what we'd normally spend against that, and that's around, and I haven't got the exact figures, so don't hold me to this exactly, but it's around about £800,000 is what we were spending a year, and we're looking to keep that into about 50% of that going forward, partly because we know that people have we've broken the habits, and a lot of printing on the multifunctional devices is habitual. People like going through a document, for example, that they can see on their screen. They like doing that when they print it out and have it stapled and go through it and make notes. And now people are getting used to doing that. And there's lots of the technology that people are starting to explore and use to do that online. So that's the sort of saving we've seen within the multifunctional devices. That's different, as we said, from the print room. But I hope that's helpful, that clarification.
Really, really helpful and really, really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike, did you want to add to this? Mike Eathorne-Gibbons, the portfolio holder for this. Did you want to add to this?
Well, thank you, Richard. I was just there are a couple of comments I'd like to make. I wonder whether you want to go through the corporate items first, which would be the last item. Then I'm happy to make a couple of comments before moving on, if that's okay.
Okay, thanks very much, Mike. Thank you.
Yep.
Chair, do you want me to go through the corporate items, which is the last chunk of the detail?
If you would, please, Tracy. Yes.
Great, thank you. So members, you can see there at 6.17 in the report that we have something called corporate items. I'm sure you're used to these, but these are essentially all of the items in the budget that aren't captured in service or directorate areas, and that I look after with my team in finance. So you can see there that it's mostly around the sort of capital, the capital ins and outs, which is quite complicated. But what we're showing you here in the report are the changes in that level. So the number of changes deliver a saving into the medium term, into 2021-22 of 5.77 million. I'm really happy to talk to you about the detail in, well, Russell would be happy to talk to you about the detail in there if I can't answer the questions. But these are largely around adjustments in capital financing.
Thank you, Tracy. And any questions on that, please? Any questions for Tracy on this section of the budget? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, Tracy.
Great, thank you. We have a refreshed business plan, which forms a major part of the medium-term financial planning reporting.
Sorry, apologies, Tracy. Mike, did you want to comment at this stage?
Oh, sorry,
well,
Mike.
Yeah,
my mistake.
No, that's okay, Tracy. It just shows we're working in tandem. Being serious for a moment, can I compliment the officers in terms of the format on these various services budget? I think it's very helpful to set out people, third-party spend, demand, growth, income, and so on and so forth. I think it does make it much easier for people to understand exactly what's going on and what the changes are. So I'd like to sort of publicly compliment Tracy and the team for doing that. I think that's very helpful. I hope, Chairman, that you and your colleagues feel likewise. I also welcome the proposal on what I call a capital expenditure control. It's been a beef of mine for some years that we tend not to look at the side of things rather than the revenue. So I sort of welcome the comments in the paragraphs 5.7, 5.8 and 5.9. I noticed the three indicators there, which I think are very important indeed. Just the thought whether we also ought to have a fourth one, namely borrowings as a percentage of assets. I just leave that with Trace and the team to give some thought to, but really just to compliment the officers on what they've done so far in very, very difficult circumstances.
Thank you. Russell, do you want to respond to that before I go to Councillor Biggs?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can do. Yes, we are looking at what other indicators we can use. We have looked at whether there's a way that we can use gearing, a more traditional approach. Doesn't seem to work particularly well with the way the council's accounts work, but the one that Councillor Eathorne-Gibbons has identified as one that we've also picked up as one that could actually work quite well. So we are looking at it and trying to see if we've got any benchmarking information as well.
Thank you very much, Steve, for that.
Thank you, Russell. Yes, obviously with my business background, it's something that I always look at, and I think it might be helpful, but I'm glad you're looking at it, Russell. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Biggs, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's just a general observation across all the directorates, really, and it's useful the way in which they're laid out. I was just looking at the pay inflation figures across all of the directorates as a percentage of the overall budgets, and I would have expected them to be roughly comparable. I thought they'd all been about the same, as they're all basically people cost in most of these departments. But I noticed that some are significantly different to others, like finance and commercial are right down at the bottom of the list, whereas strategy and engagement and the others, there's one other as well. Can you just bear with me? Yeah, and customer and business operations. Those two are more than twice the rate of inflation, twice the inflation rate, and I just wonder why that was. I would have thought it'd been a fairly consistent figure. Is there an answer to that?
I'll have a go at that. So it should be a consistent figure. The amount that was put in the budget originally for pay inflation was 2%, and there's an amount that goes in for the performance rating as well. I think we've adjusted down that 2% rise figure, which is across the board and a sort of an average, by the freeze figure, but you're right, they should all be consistent, although I suspect that there are probably differences in the makeup of the people who work in different sections. I don't know whether Russell, you can make any more sense of that.
I will try, but I think Phil Code is on, who probably knows the detail more than me, but it would be because I would generally think it's because the breakdown behind the budget figure is that there are more people-based costs in those services than the others. So there's a mixture of both people cost and non-people spend in the budget, and you've only got the starting budget in total there. So it's the mix, I would suggest. If I got it seriously wrong, Phil Code will come in, but I think that's the reason.
Phil, are you on the call? Would you like to add anything to those comments?
No, I think Russell's got it on the head there completely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was just again just looking at the figures. Assurance looks like it's spot on the money at 2%, and that's the big one. Whereas finance and commercial are down at 0.1, or down at 1.4%. So Trace is obviously doing something really well with finance and commercial to keep pay
You'd expect
inflation
me
down. Yeah. Well, I didn't dare say that, Ms. Langley, but obviously you have a firm grip on that particular department. But some of the others are significantly more than that. Again, it's probably, you're right, it's probably the mix.
Yeah.
It's just that it struck me as odd looking through them that there wasn't more of a consistent number. But
yeah. We will take that away for you, Councillor Biggs, and come back. It's in our own interest, of course, to do that as well. But we will make sure that you've got an answer to that.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Code, sorry, Mr. Phil Code, do you anything you want to add? You've got a cross in the box now?
Yes, Phil Code. So just to kind of answer Councillor Biggs' query on finance and commercial specifically, within that budget, obviously we've got a number of commercial figures in there, which include the PFI contracts, which is a huge proportion of our cost within that area. And again, in other areas, we've got income recharging and a number of contracts out there, and obviously the property service within operations and change as well, which is driving those costs and adjusting that percentage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Phil. Tracy, would you like to move us on, please?
Yes. If I know that Russell has done a little bit on the capital, the new capital strategy. I wondered, Chair, whether or not you wanted a little bit more on that before we move on.
Yes, capital is always interesting to members. So yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Russell, do you want to do your bit on?
I will do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the capital strategy is set out there in section 5. I've already touched on the position that the council's existing capital programme is in. It's around circa the 1.2 to 1.3 billion pounds mark. That's what is already approved in the council's existing capital programme. So that has already been approved by full council as part of last year's budget setting process, and with any changes that have happened this year to date. Currently, delivery, based on the last few years, our average delivery is around about the 250 million mark, and that's fairly consistent, and we're heading for a similar figure this year despite the COVID restrictions. So on that basis, it's going to take us quite a few years before we actually deliver the existing programme that members have approved. On top of that, we have a significant long list of capital asks or aspirational projects that sit within the services. Now, in normal circumstances, quite often we bring those forward as part of the budget setting process, and there's an element of prioritisation done through a set of meetings with cabinet, etc., and a number of them get added to the capital programme. Those schemes are in varying degrees of planning. So, some are fairly simple project briefs, and some have quite detailed business cases behind them. But they're added into the programme before they've really had a challenge process and where they've really got a proper strategic outline business case being formed. So if you go back to the sort of the Treasury Green Book, which is the government's, Treasury's recommended way of how you project manage capital, and more recently they've published something called the Construction Playbook for Government Capital Expenditure and Control. They're based on more work done in advance on these schemes, getting a strategic outline case in place before you approve it and get it added to the capital programme. There is some good reasons for that. It ensures that you've got a good match against your key priorities. Is this capital scheme or project going to deliver what your aspirations are as an organisation? It gives you better certainty around cost and deliverability and timing of that deliverability. Quite often we have schemes added in where a lot of the money is put in within the first 1 or 2 years of the capital ask. Without doing the planning, it usually takes a period of time anyway. You're not going to deliver it that quickly because schemes take a long time to build up, get planning in place, get commissioning in place, etc. So the whole idea is that if you put more planning in at the front end, actually you get a better delivery in the programme, more schemes being delivered on time, to cost, with more certainty. So we are proposing that we will move to this approach. We will have more planning put in before we just add items into the council's capital programme. As I said, it's significant already. To facilitate that, we feel that this year we should not be adding to the capital programme significantly like we would normally do. And there are a number of small asks that we will have to just add in as a point of sort of administration in terms of the Tor Point Ferry and Tamar Bridge, the 4th year of the HRA business plan that's rolled forward one more year now, and there are a 2 at the time and maybe a 3rd one just kicking around of projects that have secured funding, government funding, in the last couple of weeks, which we'll have to address in the final paper. But we're not anticipating or proposing to add anything more than that. What we don't want to do, though, is lose sight of all the capital asks that we've got, because these are aspirations, and some of them are very important to the services and to the people of Cornwall. So we're going to create what we call a sort of pre-pipeline scheme. I'm sorry, the terminology is a little bit, pre-pipeline. The reason is pipeline is contained within the Treasury Green Book activity. So pre-pipeline means that it's before we actually move it in with a business case. And then they will only come as part of the capital programme once they have a strategic outline business case that has been challenged through a gateway process and then brought through a member process for final approval to be added into the programme. And as I say, we're not anticipating doing any through this budget process. What we will do is take the existing capital asks and we will bring those through, those strategic outline business cases, as we go during the next 6 to 12 months, and we may well bring them in the mid-year review post the new administration, because I think also there's that element that we have to bear in mind, that these are schemes and capital asks that are for stuff that will happen 1, 2, 3 years in the future, if not further. Some of them are for programmes of works which will go over the next 10 years. So I think their input as well is needed. At the same time, we need to move from the sort of approach where we just have individual schemes brought forward to moving them into a more programme based, so batching them up to where they have a commonality that aids commissioning. I'd also move to a portfolio type approach, and the proposal that will be in the paper is that the portfolios will align with the council's priorities, and they're set out in the report there in 5.6. So those will become the total. So rather than something called EGD board and transport board and the other 15 boards that exist, we will use the priorities as the way of pulling the schemes together and setting the control totals around the capital programme. Already mentioned that the capital programme over previous years has grown quite significantly, and it's grown probably the wrong way around in some ways, in terms of the capital asks have been agreed and approved, and then we calculate the impact that then has on the Treasury indicators, whereas I think the Treasury indicators, the prudential indicators, are there to set the limits for what is prudentially affordable. So we're now moving into a stage where we're going to set the prudential indicators, and those are the limits that the council should maintain within at the moment. They have been set initially this year. We will have to just work through and see whether they do need minor alterations going forward. As I say, it's a first go. The primary one of the primary drivers of how we've got there was we have done some basic benchmarking with other authorities to see where we sit and what sort of benchmarks they use and what prudential indicators they have. And there's also an element here of, are these deliverable and sustainable at this level of indicators for the medium to long term? And what I mean there is that you could push your capital program significantly over the next 2 or 3 years if you could find a way of increasing deliverability. But the downside of that could be that you reach the sort of peak level that you can afford as a council to borrow now, and therefore the next generation may not have a capital program at all, because we've already borrowed up to the maximum the council can do. If we keep within these indicators, the ability with the repayment of the debt and the debt profile and the way that the minimum revenue provision works, this should be affordable and keep a relatively modest capital program on a consistent basis sustainable for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Prudential borrowing, which is what the indicators are around, is only one source of funding, but what we are anticipating in the capital strategy, and we're going to put in as a proposal, is that the council over a number of years has moved to a sort of mix of funding of the capital programme, and we do get a good level of external capital resources through grants, capital receipts, etc. But we've also started using reserves and some revenue funding, which is sort of the reserve money, which when you're particularly tight on revenue, you shouldn't really be doing. You should use capital resources, i.e. either external grant, capital receipts, or borrowing to fund capital, or revenue to meet your ongoing daily revenue costs. So we will build that in as a proposal as part of the strategy, that we will try and make sure that we use the resources more appropriately going forward, and we will be setting in their targets for capital receipts, as they're an important part. We, I think already mentioned by Ron Councillor, we have a significant asset base. We all know that we need to rationalise that. Part of rationalising it will reduce running costs, but it will also potentially increase capital receipts, which can help fund the capital programme going forward. And we need to set ourselves probably a challenging target to ensure that that minimises the amount we have to borrow. Questions, Chair?
Thank you very much for that, Russell. Councillor Barnes has a question for you on PFI contracts. Councillor Barnes, would you like to ask Russell your question, please, on PFI contracts?
Yes, thank you. How many PFI contracts do we have left to fund, and how much is the yearly spend, please? And when will those contracts come to an end? I thought they were a thing of the past, but clearly not.
I think I can probably answer that, because Phil sent me a note. So we've got 3 schemes, 2 education ones and 1 fire and leisure. Oh, sorry, yeah, that's education 2, ed 2, fire and leisure. The gross is around about 13 million. The net is about 8.4 million. Most of the income is now from PFI credits, but also some from service budgets.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Barnes?
I'm amazed that we still got these PFI contracts, because I thought they were a thing of the past. And there still seem to be quite a large amount to pay. Sometimes, you know, you can pay down some of these bills. Would it be better to pay them off or just keep on paying? And how much longer are they going to go on for?
I can't give you the details of how much longer we've got on them. They are generally 25-year contracts. I don't know how long we've got left on these to run. But as I say, they are still being paid for through the PFI credit system, largely. I don't know, Russell, or Phil, if you've got any more detail than that.
I come in briefly, Tracy. I mean, I think we can provide the details, but there are the education one and the waste and the one on fire. I think fire is probably the first one that will cease, but that's still got another 4 or 5 years to go. I think that'll finish in mid 2020s, if my memory serves me right.
2028 and 2025.
Yeah, I remember they started about 2020, 2000, 2001. So yes, they are 25, and I think additionally we have one that's not in this budget, but from the council's perspective, there is the waste one as well, which will go on much longer. But PFIs, yes, new ones are not happening. They are a thing of the past in terms of new, but that doesn't mean to say that you're not tied into these contracts for the long term, and the options and the opportunities to break them are not really there, and if you wanted to break them just on an arbitrary basis, they would be very, very costly to do so.
Yeah, they'd be much more expensive.
Right, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Byrne, please.
Yeah. Just to say that I think we did break two back in Kevin Lavery's time, but the fire service is about 5 or 6 years, because I knew I had a dispute when the fire station was being built, so I remember it well. Can I say to Russell, thank you for that briefing, really, because I think that it puts everything in perspective, and I just think that some way of your plan to get things in order before you actually launch out into some big capital project is very sensible, especially for an organisation like this. And of course everything's upside down when the government was saying, well, everybody must do their own thing, and now of course they've got to do their thing because they've got to spend all the money. So I think we're in a completely different place, really, than we were a few years ago. So I just think that, anyway, thank you, Russell, and it's good to see you again. I did ask a week or two ago, where is Russell hiding? But obviously, you're looking younger, and obviously, well, anyway, it's good, and thank you. And we look forward to seeing something really helpful in making sure our capital projects actually are worthwhile doing, to number one, and don't lead us down a very difficult path. Thank you.
Chair, just for clarity, there are still 3 PFI contracts: one for leisure, one for waste, and one for education.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eddy, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Russell, for the presentation on the capital strategy and the programme. So the final budget report is when we will see this recommendation coming forward. So this today is simply for our education and information. Is that right? Have I got that right?
Yes, the final recommendations will form part of the budget report, an MTFP and business plan report that comes to Cabinet and on to full council. So you will see the full details with the recommendations in there. This is a follow-up. I think you would have seen slides at one of the informal meetings you had before Christmas as well, that set out some of the thinking around the capital. We've now included it in this formal scrutiny meeting for you, to bring you up to speed formally, as I say, with the final recommendations in the final budget report.
Yeah, and how long will the transition to the new process take, do you think, then? You say here in the report that no additional capital asked through this transition to the new process. I'm just curious how long that might take.
At the minimum, we think that we will have a number of capital asks that will have gone through the process by the mid-year. By no means all. We will also have been able to review the existing capital programme and to see whether all the existing schemes within the capital programme are deliverable and still a priority post-COVID and for the future of the council.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks, Chairman. Thank you, Russell.
Councillor Fitter now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I suspect, in actual fact, you're sort of coming to the end of this very interesting financial report, and this is not a criticism or being negative, but I just wondered if I could say to you, sir, in actual fact, that the executive summary, page 2 on the front, when I read it first of all, I thought, oh, I don't like 1.2, and there is going to be a dreadful lot of, I think, pressure on people to find employment as the pandemic fades away. Jobs will have gone and unemployment will rise. And I just thought, I was very impressed to see, despite the ever-growing pressures on our finances, the council is determined to produce frontline service to support the vulnerable people through the challenge ahead and invest in our local economy to create good jobs. I would have thought, quite frankly, at this critical time, probably it's to create jobs is paramount. And I'm not quite sure, in actual fact, whether the definition of a good job to various people can mean various things. And I sincerely hope that our emphasis will be, sir, to create jobs first and foremost. And if they are what is ever called a good job, so better, that's a dividend. But I think first and foremost, our aim should be to create jobs. And I commend Tracy Langley for the efforts she's been doing. Thank you very much indeed, sir.
Thank you, John. Yes, Tracy, anything you'd like to comment on that, please?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Councillor Fitter. I think it doesn't lead us neatly into the Appendix 3, which is the business planning piece. So we've got 2 more bits left, I think, of the whole report. I wasn't planning on going through the indicative service totals, which is on Appendix 1, or the Directorate savings plans, which you've seen before, so there's nothing new in there. But there is a little bit on the business plan, which talks to Councillor Fitter's point around what our business planning looks to be concentrating on, and I just wondered whether or not before we went into the looking at the recommendations from other committees on their budget reports, other OSCs on their budget report, whether or not you just wanted to hear a little bit from Jessie on the business plan to Councillor Fitter's point. But over to you, Chair.
Yes, I think that'd be very useful. Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tracy. Members will have seen that it's section 7 of the cover report outlines the refresh of the business plan, which is appended to this report and will also be part of the pack that comes to Cabinet and full Council for decision. So members, this is just a bit of a recap. Members will know that the Council set its business plan priorities for Cornwall back in February 2018, and its accompanying financial plans on the basis of pretty extensive resident engagement. The 2017 resident survey had a really large sample size and extended question set to help us get some real insight on what mattered most to residents. And we had some quite extensive consultation and engagement during the preparations of the 2018 business plan and budget, which reached over 60,000 people across Cornwall, as well as input from each of the 5 overview and scrutiny committees. And since then, the business plan for the 2018-22 period has been refreshed and updated every year based on our engagement and consultation with residents and businesses and stakeholders each year around the spending priorities within the budget, alongside feedback we get from the twice yearly residents survey. And that just helps us to make sure that we're continuing to focus our efforts on the things that are most important to people in Cornwall. And we have carried out that kind of light touch refresh process again this year. Members will be aware the kind of formal consultation and engagement with residents and businesses on this year's preparations began with the all-member briefing on 18th of September and ran through to the 14th of December. We've had some kind of good engagement from people, and overall, that's kind of confirmed that the priorities which you set in 2018 when the council's first business plan was put in place continue to reflect the kind of priorities to residents. So as outlined at section 7, this is a light touch refresh. There have been some kind of updates to the figures and the case studies and to reflect any changes in circumstances. The substantive amendments which are being recommended to Cabinet and Council in the draft before you are to amend the Council's target to provide 1,000 homes so that it is to provide more than 1,000 homes through the council, which is recognising that the council will have achieved its commitment to provide 1,000 homes by the end of this year, and allows that focus to be extended into the 21-22 year. It proposes to amend the priority of making Cornwall Brexit ready to focus on mitigating the impact of EU exit on Cornwall, since of course the UK has now left the EU. And on page 11, we've just added a note under the chapter on Healthy Cornwall, where the success measures, as members will recall, are focused on reducing delayed transfers of care from hospital and on closing the disadvantage gap in GCSE attainment, where we're highlighting the potential challenge in reporting progress on those measures. That's just due to national data challenges on reporting during the pandemic. So those are the kind of only substantive changes, and I'd be very happy to take any kind of questions or comments from members.
Thank you for that, Jessie. I've got a cross in the box from Councillor Keeling. Councillor Keeling, was there anything you wish to?
Actually, it was a question for Tracy, but we've moved on now, so I think I'll leave it. I'll put it before you moved on onto the business case. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay.
Chair, I should have flagged, obviously, members, it goes without saying that following the elections, we know an incoming administration will have its own priorities, and will of course kind of want to review this in light of theirs coming in.
Okay, thank you. So any questions for the business plan? Otherwise, we'll move on to our last section. Okay, Tracy, please, you can take us forward to the last section, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the last thing that we are asking your committee to do, Chair, is to take into consideration the recommendations made from other overview and scrutiny committees on their views of the budget before you make your recommendations onwards to Cabinet on all of the overview and scrutiny's behalves. And I don't know, Adam is on as well, and I wondered whether or not Adam wanted to say anything as well. Not to put you in, not to put you in it, Adam. But over to you, Chair. Tracy Clark has the recommendations from the other committees on a slide deck. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Yes, the recommendations from the other scrutiny committees were circulated, but Tracy Clark is going to put them up on her screen and share them with us. I invite Adam to make any comment that he might wish to make, and then I'll go to the questions from our own committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. So I've been asked just to take you through the budget recommendations from the other OSC meetings for you to consider in the round when making your own recommendations. So economic growth and development overview and scrutiny. Can you see that slide there?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, lovely. Yeah, so that was on the 12th of January. The recommendations on the report were for the financial assumptions and the budget proposals for services within the remit of the committee to be supported and recommended to Cabinet, and the committee changed the recommendations to noted and recommended. And they also added a resolution for the staff involved in the budget preparations to be thanked. So hopefully, if I can move up the screen there. Can you see Children and Families OSC now?
Yes, I can see it.
That's great. So that's 13th of January. They resolved that the underlying financial assumptions and proposals for services within their remit be supported and recommended to the Cabinet, and thank the staff of the Together for Families directorates for their support to vulnerable children and families. So moving on down. Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee, 20th of January. They noted the financial assumptions and budget proposals for services within their remit and referred them to Cabinet. They also added to recommendation 1 that they restated their commitment to the principle of everyone working in a service with roles funded by the council should be paid the foundation living wage. Recommendation 3, they commended the adult social care workforce for their work and their work with the NHS, recognising that there aren't unlimited resources. And their recommendation 4 was about the adult social care precept being a burden to local council taxpayers and not being able to achieve enough funding that way in Cornwall with an ageing population and demand for services increasing. And they also called on the leader to press government to address this issue with additional central funding in the March budget and long-term reform within 12 months. And then moving on, number 5 from the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee, welcomed cooperation across departments and organisations to allow the drug and alcohol treatment funding to be topped up without taking resources from other health and social care services. Number 6, recognised the role played by unpaid carers and personal assistants and called for funding to support them to be increased as a proportion of the adult social care budget over the next 5 years. And number 7, noted with concern that the public health grant wasn't enough to deal with the health and wellbeing impact of the pandemic and respond to future challenges, including pandemics. And then Neighbourhoods, 21st of January, they resolved that the underlying financial assumptions and proposals for services within their remit be supported and recommended to Cabinet. And they resolved that early in the next administration, they should make time to look at a sustainable funding model for action on climate change from 2022 onwards. So that was a quick whiz through the recommendations of the other 4 overview and scrutiny committees for you to be mindful of as part of your overview of the budget. Thanks, Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much indeed for that, Tracy. So we've seen the recommendations from the other scrutiny committees. We have ours before us in the committee report. Any comments from members? Any amendments to be suggested and talked about? I leave it open for committee members to put a cross in the box. Otherwise, I will probably move the recommendations as they exist. Councillor Eddy, please. Councillor Eddy.
Thank you, Chairman. I go back to the recommendation from Health and Adult Social Care, where they make a reference to the foundation living wage. And I think that in the care sector has been an incredibly important feature of maintaining a stable workforce, of helping a lot of the lower paid workers, and also will no doubt help people pay for the council tax rise. So I think it's something that we should continue to endorse as a committee, Chairman, and I recommend that if I can find any backing for it as a recommendation from this committee going forward.
Okay, thank you. If you'd like to think of some wording, Councillor Eddy, while we listen to Councillor Biggs, who's also got a cross in the box.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think Councillor Fisher and Keeling are ahead of me, aren't they? No,
I think that was from a previous discussion.
Okay, yeah, okay, thank you for that, Chairman. Yeah, as far as the recommendations themselves are concerned, Chairman, I think it would be appropriate to note the reports and the budget proposals. I don't think I would be prepared to recommend them to Cabinet. I don't think that's proper to a scrutiny committee, because we're meant to be apolitical, and the budget setting is the most political thing that we do in the council by a very long way. So I think it's proper that we note them, but I certainly could not support actually recommending to Cabinet that they go forward.
Okay, Councillor Biggs, have you got a form of words for that?
Yeah, I think with Tracy Clark's support, I think if Tracy, if you could just add in the words notes rather than be supported. So rather than be supported and recommended to Cabinet, it's noted. I'm sure Tracy could sort something out for us.
Okay. Do you have a seconder for that, Councillor Biggs?
Yes, Chairman, it's Carol Mould. Yes, happy to second.
Okay, thank you for that. So it's as proposed by Councillor Biggs, seconded by Councillor Mould, that we note the report. And Councillor Biggs, does that remove recommend as well? Just note the report?
Yes, please, Chairman, yes.
Okay, thanks. Tracy Clark, if you could just take a look at that, please, and I'll come back. Councillor Keeling, you've got a cross in the box.
I was just going to support Councillor Biggs on this one. I do agree with his comments that we should be apolitical, and this is getting very political at the moment, particularly some of the comments made by the other scrutiny committee. So I agree with David Biggs on this.
Thank you, John. Going back to Councillor Biggs, how does that stand in relation to recommendation 2? Are you going to amend that as well?
Yes, please, Chairman. Yeah, I think yes. Yeah, in the round. Okay,
thanks. Tracy Clark, if you could just look at that, please. I'm going to go back to Councillor Eddy now. Do you want to propose like a third recommendation, Councillor Eddy, in relation to the foundation living wage?
I think we would support our colleagues in the health and adult social care in restating our commitment to the principle that everyone working in a service that has council funded roles must be paid at least the foundation living wage.
And would that be your proposed wording?
I think it would, Chairman, unless Tracy tells me comes up with some better wording, which is probably very likely.
That, Chairman.
And does that Councillor Barnes seconding that? Okay, so that's a third recommendation, which is proposed by Councillor Eddy, seconded by Councillor Barnes, and I'm going to give Tracy Clark a few moments just to work through those changes. And then we'll take the amendments first. Councillor Burden, you've got a cross in the box.
Yeah, it's only for clarity, really. I mean, we've had an extremely good debate, and I want to commend the officers not only for their presentation, but for their openness in discussing these issues. And I just wonder, how will that just be in the minutes of our meeting, or should we put it in as an addendum to the recommendations? Because it has been comprehensive, and I think it's been good.
I would suspect that Tracy Clark will reflect that in her minutes, I would think, but Tracy might like to comment on that herself.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll make sure that all the key points made by committee members are included in the minutes.
Thank you very much.
It's not only the members, it's the officers. Because they have opened up, if you understand me.
Yes, definitely all the key points made by the officers too, Councillor Burden.
And I've just to let committee members know that I've established with Tracy Clark that the names of the officers who I read out at the beginning of this item, that those names will be recorded in the minutes. Right, now Tracy, help me with this. We've got two amendments. We've got an amendment from Councillor Biggs, seconded by Councillor Mould, that we note the report. So do we take that first, and then do we take the additional recommendation by Councillor Eddy, seconded by Councillor Barnes? How do we proceed in this, please?
Okay, so the proposal by Councillor Biggs, seconded by Councillor Mould, is the sort of substantive motion being put forward, because I don't believe there was a seconder when you proposed the original. There wasn't a seconder when you proposed the original recommendations. So the proposal by Councillor Biggs and seconded by Councillor Mould is the one that's on the table. So you could vote on that, and then you could vote separately on the proposal by Councillor Eddy and seconded by Councillor Barnes. Does that sound good? Unless councillors Biggs and Mould want to absorb that into their recommendations, but then again it may be that Councillor Eddy and Councillor Barnes would prefer to have that as their own recommendation.
I will go to Councillor Biggs just to establish whether or not he's happy to absorb that further recommendation into his amendment.
No, I think it would be helpful if it was kept separate, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. So I think Tracy Clark, we'll go to a vote now on Councillor Biggs's amendment, which, as you say, is the substantive recommendation now. So do you want to take a roll call on that proposal, please?
Yes, please. So the recommendation is number 1, that the underlying financial assumptions contained within the balanced budget proposals for 2021 to 2022 are set out in this report be noted. And number 2, the budget for the services within the remit of this committee, the budget proposals for the financial years 2021 to 22 to 2024 to 25 are set out in this report be noted. And that's proposed by Councillor Biggs and seconded by Councillor Mould. So if we can go to the vote, please. Councillor Rutherford.
Councillor Rutherford, for.
Councillor Barnes.
Councillor Barnes, for.
Councillor Biggs.
Dave Biggs, for.
Councillor Burden.
For.
Councillor Buscombe.
For.
Councillor Eddy.
For.
Councillor Fitter.
For.
Councillor Frost.
For.
Councillor Hawkins.
Hawkins, for.
Councillor Keeling.
Keeling, for.
Councillor Monk.
For.
Councillor Moorcroft.
For.
Councillor Mould.
Carol Mould, for.
And Councillor Saunders.
Councillor Saunders, for.
So that's been carried unanimously, Chairman. And so then going on to recommendation 3, that the committee supports colleagues from the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee in restating the commitment to the principle that everyone working in a service that has council funded roles must be paid at least the foundation living wage. Is that correct, Councillor Eddy?
I'm happy with that. Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, and Councillor Barnes, were you still happy to second that?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, so if we can go to the vote then, Councillor Rutherford.
Councillor Rutherford, for.
Councillor Barnes.
Councillor Barnes, for.
Councillor Biggs.
Abstain.
Councillor Burden.
Councillor Burden, for.
Councillor Buscombe.
For.
Councillor Eddy.
For.
Councillor Fitter.
Fitter, for.
Councillor Frost.
For.
Councillor Hawkins.
Hawkins, for.
Councillor Keeling.
For.
Councillor Monk.
For.
Councillor Moorcroft.
For.
Councillor Mould.
Carol Mould, for.
And Councillor Saunders.
Councillor Saunders, for.
So, Chairman, that's 13 for and 1 abstention, so that's carried.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, I believe that brings us to the end of our deliberations on the budget. I would just like to reiterate my thanks to the officers concerned. And if I could just say to the members, at our March meeting, we will be considering a report on how the budget process has gone this year. That's through all the consultation that we had before Christmas. So we'll be having a roundup of the budget process and how well we felt it went this year. And I'm going to ask Tracy Clark to write out to all our committee members, asking them to submit their views. I will also ask Tracy to write to the chairpersons of all the other scrutiny committees to get their views on what they felt went well and what could be perhaps improved upon for a further year. So we'll be considering that report at our March meeting. But thank you all for that. That was a very good debate. Now, we've been going now for over 2.5 hours, and we've still got a couple of things to do. So what I'm proposing to do is to break for lunch now and to come back at 5 minutes past 1. Is everyone happy with that, please? And if everyone's happy for that, can you please turn your microphones and your cameras off? Tracy Clark, have I got that right?
Yes, please, Chairman,
Yes.
if members can stay connected to the call to avoid another technical check, but just turn the microphones and cameras off, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So I look forward to seeing you all again at 1 past 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
bit chilly, Richard. You've put your jumper on.
Well, good afternoon, members. It's 1:05 in Padstow, so I'd like to continue our meeting if everyone's available. I'm now looking at item 7 of our agenda, which is working with and developing local supply chains. I just want to say a couple of words of introduction, if I may, on this. Mainly to express my thanks to Martin Eddy and the other members of the team, Carol Mould, Lee Frost, John Keeling and Robert Moorcroft, who I think have done an excellent job on this piece of work. I've often said that a lot of what we do as a committee, isn't sort of the sort of thing that gets into the media, but it is things that are the lifeblood of this council, and ensures that it operates in an efficient and effective manner. And I think this is a piece of work that will, form the basis of going forward. Will form the basis of the way in which we contract our services. So, if Martin, if you're on call, please, could I ask you to talk to members about the work of your group and what you've achieved, and also just to highlight the issues that we've come across in the last 72 hours, please. But Martin, you and your group have my thanks. I think you've done an excellent job to this.
Richard, could I jump in first, please, as it falls within my portfolio here, and add to
Mikey from Givens, you're on mute.
Not according to my machine, I'm not.
You're still on mute, Mike.
We'll try again.
No, you're not, Mike. I can hear you.
You weren't, Mike. No, you're fine.
Well,
Mike, I can hear you.
Must be the.
Can you hear me, Richard?
Mike, I can't hear you, Mike. I don't know if it's me or.
It must be you, Richard, but I can hear Michael all right.
It's Padstow time. It's 10 years behind.
Is your volume turned down on your computer, Chairman?
It's really add my compliments to what you said,
Tracy Clark, I don't know if you're there. I'm not sure if it's me that's having problems or Mikey from Givens. Oh. Apologies, members. Mike, you have my apologies. I had my sound turned down. I do apologise most profusely. Entirely my fault. Sorry.
It must be a bit. Is it a bit foggy in North Cornwall then, Richard? Yeah, all I was going to say.
Can I just, sorry, can I ask members, did you all hear what I had to say?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, you did?
Yes,
Right. Yeah, sorry. Right. So, Mikey.
Sorry, Richard, before the discussion starts, I would like to echo my thanks to what has been done so far, and to add to what you had to say, because this is a challenging area, and full marks to the working party and what they've done. So I think it's excellent. I think it will stand the council in good stead for some time. And I look forward to the discussions as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with no further ado, I hand over to Martin Eddy, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to say a few words about how we got to where we are, some thanks, and to bring you up to date with the changes in the recommendations and the reasons behind those that have happened within the last day. But I'm pleased to present this report for your consideration. Its creation has been a fascinating journey where we've been able to talk to Cornish organisations, to other local authorities, to researchers in the field of social value, and we've attended conferences, surveyed businesses and other councils, as well as written evidence both from people within the council and external to it. It's been collated into the report in front of you today, and my thanks must go, as you've said, Chairman, to Councillors Mould, Keeling, Frost and Moorcroft, who've helped with their guidance and wise words. Thank you. Now, all the work has been conducted during the COVID crisis. We've left Europe during that time, and it would be not possible without the considerable help from Rachel Rotherow and her commercial services team. So on behalf of the inquiry, our thanks must go to them, because it's not been an easy time for them drafting their budget and moving to a new operating model whilst looking after us. So thanks also to Robert Buckley and Sarah Wilson for their technical support, and of course a great big thank you to our Tracy Clark for her organisational and draft report writing skills. So in our inquiry, working with and enhancing our supply chains, we realised rapidly that this was an evolving area of work. We needed to do the enhancing with and working with in the areas of social, environmental and economic value of our contracts. And we felt that's where would be the greatest benefits for Cornwall and its people. Our approach has been to define the policy background. It's to set our target parameters. We've sought potential partners in setting what we've brought before you today. And we've considered the cultural organisation required to deliver it. We try to be outward looking in our approach, talking with partners both inside and outside of Cornwall, and we hope that we can work with them in the future to raise awareness of social value. We describe within the report how social and environmental values can be measured in contracts using what we call the TOMS model. That's targets, outcomes and measures, and you'll hear TOMS, I think, quite a lot about TOMS going forward. And how this can be used alongside the council's decision wheel to help inform our choices. We've also linked the work to Gwilym Borbath, the Together We Can, the Cornwall Plan, and that allows anchor organisations, other anchor organisations, to join with us in obtaining the maximum social value. We've also described how we want to engage with our contractors and their representatives earlier in the procurement process. We want to increase the mutual understanding of social value, both at the start of the process and throughout the process. We've heard from witnesses of the necessity to have the right organisational culture within our organisation, and again we described that within the report. At last week's LGA conference, for instance, we heard how the achievement of social value was written into employees' jobs descriptions. We have not gone that far as to recommend changes to job descriptions, but we do recommend minimum social value weightings for contract assessments, which will deliver value to and from our contracts, whether they're delivered by companies within inside Cornwall or outside. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a fast-moving area. We've used parliamentary procedure notes, PPNs, to give us some guidance. And in fact, one was issued after we'd finished our inquiry. So today we have got some fresh advice and guidance on PPN, Parliamentary Procedure Note 1120, and the conflict it has with the existing legislation. It may be a good point now to ask Tracy to put up the new recommendations, and I can just walk us through that, Chairman.
Yes, please. Would Tracy.
Thank you. So we were delighted to see PPN arrive. It gave us some additional freedoms, the freedoms to define where our contractors could come from, and the freedoms to describe the type of contractors who could bid for a contract. But we have had legal advice that this conflicts with the Local Government Act of 1988, whereby it makes it illegal to define geographically where contractors can come from for various service for services as opposed to works and supplies. So the recommendations will be modified, as you can see there in front of you, Chairman. As to the report itself, Chairman, would you like me to walk through the different recommendations, or how would you like me to treat it? I can whiz through the different recommendations, or we could, move to questions, Chairman. It's really as you would consider most timely.
Could you take us through the recommendations, please? Because I think, as I said in my introduction, I think this is an important piece of work which will assist the council for a long time to come. So I think I think it would be good to hear the recommendations. Thank you.
Okay. So if we look at pages 19 and 20, we've got currently two recommendations on pages 19 and 20. Recommendation on 19 will stand as it is. If we turn over to page 20, the recommendation 20 at the top of to the recommendations to Cabinet, the first one will be reworded as you see on Tracy's slide. The second recommendation will be reworded, again reflecting this conflict between the Local Government Act and the Policy Procedure Note. And the third one there again is reworded again to reflect that conflict. We're also suggesting that because of the conflict between the freedoms given us by the note and the Local Government Act, that we ask the leader to draw this to the attention of the government and ask that there be some resolution. The benefit of that being that if we had greater freedoms around where and to who we could allocate contracts, we may end up retaining greater value within this county. So, Chairman, if we turn to page 54 of the report, we'll look at the recommendations, and I make no apologies for the number of recommendations because we've made a very wide ranging inquiry looking at the various areas, but recommendations 1.1 to 1.22 deal with policy setting. So again, I don't intend to run through them all, but I think particularly important is 1.5, where procurement's below 25k. It's the mandated default that should be considered given to a Cornish supplier first. So I'm very pleased with that. If we turn to, sorry, Chairman, I'm just looking at my notes here. Have I covered everything off? Pleased with that? Yes, thank you. If we turn to recommendation 1, which continues on page 55, we see there the adoption of the TOMS, which for the first time, Chairman, gives us a way of measuring social value and comparing contracts side by side. It's not just social value, but also the environmental value of that. It also recommends the looking at the process of procurement, both downstream and upstream, and how that can be improved to enhance social values. Recommendation 2, Chairman, top of page 56, picks up the opportunity offered by the government's procurement policy note 1120 and has now been amended as we've described. Recommendation 3 asks for a fresh look at the local definition. We are looking now halfway down page 56, Chairman. We felt that the definition of local, and we hear how local is described within the county, but actually it covers a number of postcodes that are both Exeter and Plymouth. And so if it is described by postcode, I think we could tighten up on that definition of local and gain further information. So we're asking the team to just have a fresh look at the local definition. We also bring in the council decision win, and we also say, could you look at the existing contracts, and there may be some quick wins that we can put into those contracts so that we have social value wins straight away. Recommendation 4, we ask our commercial team to work with local partners to develop the understanding of social value. So we heard that there was quite poor understanding of what is social value. Social value could, for instance, be an apprenticeship scheme, or the training of volunteers, or the use of local suppliers to supply materials. So all those would produce additional social value. So we've asked other organisations to come and work with us to help develop that knowledge amongst local contractors. Recommendation 5, which is on page 57, Chairman, is to the Cabinet, calling for them to maximise the opportunity to enhance social value through really, I think, the stating of our strategic intent to do so. We've learnt that the culture of the organisation is very important in maximising social value, both for us and the people of Cornwall. It has to be at the forefront of people's thoughts as they go out to buy services, as they go to commission services. It has to be at the forefront of our other anchor organisations and those people that we work with, Chairman. So there's a cultural change that needs to be driven. And lastly, but not least, Chairman, is the fact that we want our portfolio holder to bring the maximum pressure to bear on our group of companies so that they adopt this framework as well. So that it's not just Cornwall Council, but it's group of companies that are delivering the maximum social value into Cornwall. So that, I'm afraid, Chairman, is rather a gamble through the recommendations that we put before you here today. But I'm happy to take questions, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now, members, questions from Martin and his team, please. You can put a cross in the box. Councillor Kirkham, would you like to start, please? Because I know you've got a very great interest in this subject. So please, Councillor Kirkham, could you please start?
I have, if that's okay. I don't know whether you want to take members of the committee first, but if you're fine with that, then that would be great. This was this kind of dovetailed nicely with the motion that I put to council back in July, which was about social value and procurement. And so I attended, I think, every session but one of these, and they were really, really interesting and very good. And we heard evidence from all over the country, different authorities and different experts in this field, and it was really fascinating. And also must give thanks to our officers who were really on this and have done some very good work. The responsible procurement policy, for example, and looking again at our social value, because it's an area that's quite complicated. And as we found, even from talking to the other authorities, they don't always understand it either. There was just a few questions that I had, because obviously the recommendations have changed slightly since I went to the last meeting. My first question was recommendation 5.6. That was the social value provision for contracts between 25,000 and the ODU limits. That's been set at 10% for the social value there, which is actually under the government's new policy notes is the minimum. Now, I wondered why we hadn't decided to try and do a bit better than the minimum and maybe push to 15 as a minimum there. So that was the first question. The second question was about the amendments that have just been put down today, about the local suppliers for contracts under 25,000 being presumed to be Cornish in the first instance. And I see that that's now been restricted to, I think it was services only. I was a bit confused about that. I have, obviously, we did discuss the law on that before, and we did hear evidence from other local authorities that said that they were already doing that. So I kind of feel, are we being particularly cautious here, or are those other authorities taking big risks? That's my question.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Kirkham. Martin, do you want to respond to those? I see Rachel's on the call as well, so I don't know if Rachel wishes to take those, but if someone could respond to Councillor Kirkham, that would be helpful, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I might just pick up the 10% point. I think, yes, you're right, it is a minimum. And should we have been more ambitious? I think it's like everything else. It's a learning process that we're going through here, and I think at 10% to get the process up and running, 10% to see how it goes. But you also see in the recommendations how we've asked that level of 10% is reviewed in 12 months' time to see if it can be increased, and also where there's opportunities to go higher than 10 to 15%, we will take those as well. In terms of the conflicts between the PPN and the Local Government Act, I'll let Rachel speak to that and the level of risk that other local authorities are taking, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Martin. Rachel, would you like to come in on this, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll just also pick up on the 10% point as well. So at the moment, Councillor Kirkham, as you know, our social value policy, the current social value policy, effectively talks about above threshold being anywhere between 3 and 15%. So effectively, the starting position of 15% moves us a long way above threshold. There is no requirement at all at the moment in terms of our current social value policy to consider effectively below threshold, so moving effectively to 10%, and there is no reason why we can't go higher than 10% effectively if we are able to, but actually we are building 10% in as a minimum requirement is a significant step forward from where we are at the moment. And clearly our whole kind of procurement approach has been to have a proportionate approach, and where we're wanting to really focus our effort around this is obviously those areas where we've got larger strategic procurements where we think there's a real opportunity to drive out social value, and clearly that will be around targeting those areas where it's above threshold. In relation to the other point, and the other point is a complex one, so I will also bring Mark in on this because it's a changing landscape, and it's changing actually on a kind of weekly basis at the moment. So the PPN is a policy note that was issued by government actually after the inquiry had closed on the 15th of December. And we were quite excited about the PPN because actually for below threshold, so that's 189k effectively for revenue contracts, and that's 4.7 million for our large capital contracts, that enabled us not on a blanket basis, but to use our discretion to effectively specify where we wanted to commission from our local suppliers or our different types of suppliers like SMEs. Now, since that point, and obviously that ended up being built indeed into our policy position and also into the inquiry recommendation, since that point, I think that there has been some challenge by legal representatives in response to the PPN that was issued by government because of its interface with another piece of legislation, which is the Local Government Act. And I think this is where, Mark, it would be really helpful if you're just able to explain effectively this tension that we've got between this PPN policy position and the Local Government Act and how it relates to different types of contracts, because there is a subtlety around the different types of contract question. Are you able to, Mark, are you able to interject on this? Because it is a legal question.
Yeah, yes, so happy to. So, Mr. Chairman, are you happy for me to come in?
Yes, please do, Mark. Yes, please do.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So the procurement policy notes are policy guidance that's issued by the Cabinet Office on behalf of government to contracting authorities. So the council is obviously a contracting authority in terms of its procurement activity. The PPN 1120 is addressed to all contracting authorities, and it talks about sort of freedoms and flexibilities in terms of sub-threshold procurements, so procurements that would have been below what would have been the OJU threshold in terms of exposure to the public contracts regs. Now, sort of essentially, so that sort of flexibility, so it doesn't distinguish, it doesn't talk about local authorities being a separate class of contracting authorities, but we suspect that this has been overlooked. It doesn't look like a deliberate policy issue, because what hasn't been sort of what hasn't been joined up is the fact that there is existing legislation that's still in place. That was put in place in the late 80s. Essentially, sort of my understanding of it is that it was put in place by the government at the time to prevent local authorities from using non-commercial considerations, for example, to boycott businesses that were linked to the apartheid regime in South Africa. So that particular section, Section 17 of the Local Government Act 1988, sort of includes an express restriction around sort of making procurement decisions based on the location or territory of a particular sort of economic operator. Now, that has been amended, but it hasn't been repealed. So the Public Services Social Value Act in 2012 introduced effectively a neat little way of kind of amending that essentially said, as far as sort of social value is concerned, it's disapplied, but that this application was only made to the extent that it related to services contracts. So it doesn't sort of disapply that sort of particular piece of legislation, that particular act, sort of that particular section from works or contracts for the supply of goods. Now, we suspect, and I've seen sort of various legal commentary on this. I think Rachel referred to a challenge. It's not quite a challenge. I think there's legal commentary sort of out there sort of on this issue, and sort of the kind of the suspicion sort of is that sort of this isn't a deliberate sort of attempt to sort of distinguish local authorities from other contracting authorities. It simply looks like it's overlooked. And there is obviously a green paper on public procurement that's currently out for consultation, with the consultation due to end, I think, something like the 10th of March. But again, the current consultation on those reforms don't specifically address this residual sort of restriction in Section 17. So I think sort of part of the reason for sort of suggesting that we might want to sort of consider how we address this is it looks like the government simply hasn't thought that through. I might be wrong, but it's you know, the way that the PPN is written sort of suggests to me that this just hasn't been thought through. So that it's one of those examples, unfortunately, where you have existing fairly old legislation that sort of is still there and causes a trap. And of course, I mean, so we do have other things like the general power of competence under the Localism Act, but one of the kind of carve-outs from that is where you've got an existing express restriction, it doesn't override that. And the procurement policy note, whilst it's really helpful, and it's particularly helpful around services contracts, I would say, it doesn't, as a policy, as a guidance note, it doesn't override that existing legislative restriction. Now, I think, so Councillor Kirkham, you asked about the risk. I suppose the risk is that we would be in breach of that particular piece of, in breach of Section 17. I can't say what the likelihood is of somebody bringing forward a legal challenge, but I can say that sort of if a challenge was brought, we would probably have difficulty in defending that as the law stands at the moment. So it's unfortunate. It's something that sort of it looks as though it was not considered, it was overlooked.
Can I ask a supplementary, please, Chair?
Sure.
Yes, that'll be fine, Councillor Kirkham.
Yep, just to say, yes, I understand that, and I understand the fiddle of it. It's just there are other local authorities who are already doing it. One very close to here for contracts under 25,000, and I am wondering if they are doing it, can we not do it too, or do you think that Cornwall Council is slightly more risk averse than maybe that other city council not very far away from here?
So if I'm responding and giving legal advice, I'd never advise us sort of going.
No, I'm asking the wrong person, I think, aren't I? Thank you for the explanation.
Chairman, would you mind if I just came in on that point? Mark's probably looking a bit anxious now in terms of my response around this.
To ask a lawyer.
What I would say, Councillor Kirkham, and tragically, Mark and I actually did go through and review effectively the CPRs of which are obviously the kind of local framework of adoption across a number of organisations that obviously gave evidence as part of the inquiry. And I think one thing I would say is the recommendation that we're putting forward, which is about defaulting to absolutely where we possibly can, spending our below 25k in Cornwall is generous, comparatively. And of course, because we are doing that through a kind of a single supplier approach rather than a competitive approach, we are able to specify in those circumstances that we do want to default to that being spent in Cornwall where we possibly can. Now, of course, there will be circumstances where that won't be possible, but where we can, we want that to be our starting position.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. I mean, as a non-legal person, I sort of understand at the moment that there's a consultation, document out on this, and I think, I shall drop my own MP a line on this just to make them aware. I always find them very helpful, I have to say, and I think it's something we should respond to the consultation and make our points known. I'm going to go to Councillor Mould now, with apologies to Councillor Atherfold, who will obviously bear in mind. But Councillor Mould was a member of Councillor Eddy's working group. So Councillor Mould, please, would you like to make your point?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. First of all, I just wanted to thank Martin very much for heading up this inquiry. I mean, as always, he's been professional and good and led us all in the right direction, which was a great help. And our officers have been, especially Rachel, they've been a great help. And I was actually surprised as we went out and about and heard the witnesses, in actual fact, how council are above the rest in many respects. Lots of times, we were ahead of the curve. But the things that, oh gosh, sorry, I seem to have dropped off. The thing that struck home mostly for me that I've taken from this is that it is the understanding of social value. People don't, and I would hope that moving forward in a year's time, if we have more events where potential suppliers are called together, we have meetings with them, we explain what it is, that 10% will rise, and we will get, because I don't think a lot of people understand they've got any, even if they do know what it is, and they've probably got quite a lot. So I think that's something that's got the potential to grow. But the biggest thing for me, and it's something that we've heard, haven't we, through this the Scrutiny Committee a lot, is our digital rollout. Now, our digital uplifting, our digital lining up of all these services is going to play a very large part of a single point of contact for these suppliers. So it's been really, really interesting, and probably one of the highlights of being my 4 years in council. I've really enjoyed it. It was interesting, and so thank you for everybody. And I think it's got, and of course the final point probably, Richard, is that I think it is imperative that whether we drag them kicking and screaming, our parent companies, Corserve, they have, we all need to be singing from the same hymn sheet here. And in fact, we are starting from a mute point, aren't we? Because they've got a different IT system. But hey ho, upwards and onwards, as they say. So yes, it's just a big thank you to everybody, really. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Carol. Thank you for that. Going back to Councillor Atherfold, please.
Yes, it's a really interesting read. I'm just going from page 70 onwards, and we're looking at a potential selection of the TOMs. Now, some of these have got really impressive aims and ambitions, but I'm just thinking, is it realistic? Let me give you an example. Where were we? So no one goes hungry, for example, food, towards the top of page 72. These are designed, as I understand it, so they're measurable. Is that something we can realistically measure?
Don't know who'd want to respond to that one.
Probably Martin, I'd have thought.
Yeah. I'm quite happy, Chairman. So the TOMS is and you're quite right, Councillor. There is a huge menu of measures that you could adopt. And what we've done here is set out a few examples of potential measures, not that we will adopt them, but they could be adopted. And the point there is really to illustrate really the golden thread, really from contract right up to strategy, and strategy right back down to contract. So some of these could be key indicators going forward, but we're not suggesting here that every one of them is adopted, simply that these are these could form the basis for a selected number of indicators going forward.
Okay. I just don't want us to, put something, a lofty ambition that's not achievable. But okay.
Chairman, would you mind if I just also built on what Councillor Eddy's just talked about?
Yes, please. Please come in. Please come in.
So I think one of the challenges, and it's at the heart really of the recommendations that we've got at the moment, is we've got, and it is staggering. We're spending, you know, nearly £800 million a year. We've got 5,700 odd suppliers. We've got many more contracts. And I think one of the challenges that we've all struggled with is how do we, across that vast supply chain and all of those suppliers and all of those contracts, capture and aggregate up in a measurable way effectively the social value that's been delivered over and above effectively the primary purpose of those contracts across our supply chain, which is why effectively the TOM system for us becomes so important, because that is the way other authorities have managed to start to kind of get a grip, an aggregated grip of effectively the benefits that are being delivered effectively through their social value policy, and as Councillor Eddy has alluded to, the alignment between the council's priorities in terms of the golden thread and what's being delivered through its supply chain.
Okay, yeah, it's very impressive, but I just want to make sure that it's achievable. Okay.
Thanks for that, Councillor Arthur Fowler. Councillor Monk, now please.
Hi, no, I'd just like to congratulate Martin for a fantastic, and the rest of the team for a fantastic, full and comprehensive report. It's really, really well done. You can see how much work they've put into it. I also picked up on the 25 grand contract with the local procurement aspect attached to it. But I've been reassured by the response given that the 10% can be moved upwards in the future. So I think that's a great starting point. But yeah, well done all. It's a really, really good report.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks, Councillor Monk. Any more crosses in the box, please? Any other points, any other comments on this piece of work? Councillor Keeling. Yes, Councillor Keeling, please.
Yeah, I'm just a bit slow getting that cross off my speaker. Yeah, I mean, this is really, you know, I remember what was said in the budget description some time ago was this is about driving down the cost of the £800 million spend and also trying to add social value at the same time. I mean, I was conscious that perhaps that we need to spend time in areas where we can add most value and don't make it so complicated. It's starting to sound very complicated, and it shouldn't be really. We just got to move forward with it. And frankly, when you've got 5,500 suppliers, many more contracts, and £800 million third-party spend, we need to be in a position where we can find that information at the click of the button. So really, alongside this needs to go our digital improvement program. Otherwise, I can't see how we can actually improve to the point where we're actually measuring social value through the TOMs. And I just leave it at that at the moment. But it's an excellent piece of work. And if Martin's inclined to move it, I will willingly second it.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Byrne, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Well done to the team and to the effort. We've talked about it for years, and at least we've got somewhere with it. So I'm a bit sad about the hitch that we've come up with yesterday, but hopefully that'll be resolved. It's all about togetherness, and as a community, and not us and them, we can all play a part. And I think that the public will, especially to the local entrepreneurs who want to establish service industries, will join in. But how are we going to roll it out? And this pre-registration thing, I hope that won't be too onerous and put people off. And that's my two questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Byrne. Would someone like to respond to that? And if that's of an operational issue, but
I think, Chairman, Councillor Eddy, that is an operational issue. Perhaps if Rachel would like to pick that up.
Okay. No, absolutely. I mean, undoubtedly, is an ambitious set of recommendations. I think it would be fair to say that actually a number of the elements of the recommendations we have been working on really probably over about the last 6 months, specifically in relation to bringing the policies forward. But I think Councillor Eddy alluded to earlier on that this is going to be a big cultural shift, that it's going to require some kind of real leadership across the organisation and across with the supply chain and our partner organisations to be able to deliver. So whilst effectively I suspect the leadership and the kind of the delivery of this will be driven from my team, it's going to require effectively a team effort.
Hey, Mr. Chancellor, could we be assured that this registration process will be what I call people friendly rather than something too over the top, as it were, and that's what if it's not friendly, then people won't sign up to register to take on contracts. So that's what concerns me. We got so far, but we've got one more step to go, really, is to get people to sign up so that they can then put in a price for a job. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Bird, and I think in response to that question, we know that our current e-procurement platform is not very user-friendly. Probably about 6 months ago now, we have procured a new e-procurement platform that I think is much more user-friendly. It also, the new e-procurement platform also combines effectively an e-contract management platform, because at the moment we don't have effectively anything that is able to bring together effectively our procurements and our contract management. Part of, though, this new portal will be about pre-registration, because one of the things effectively our suppliers tell us is they're having to input kind of basic information around them as a provider on multiple occasions every time they bid for work. And one of the things that we need to be doing as part of the implementation of this new system, which we're expecting to have in place by the end of April, is obviously dealing with this pre-registration point.
Could I just sort of
thank you.
Could I just interject, Vice Chairman, and say, it's always been the policy of this scrutiny committee over the past 4 years that any piece of work we do, we review and keep on the boil just to make sure that our intentions are followed through, and if they're not, that we understand why. Now, obviously, there'll be elections in May and a new committee and a lot of new members, but I do hope that anyone that's still around, after May and who sits on this committee or something similar will continue to monitor this and just check up on the registration process, that it is in plain English and easily understood by small contractors. Councillor Mould, you had your hand up again?
Yeah, thank you much. Yeah, just to sort of expand on that a bit, when we spoke to the Chamber of Commerce, it was the first thing that he said, that the small suppliers find the whole system really clunky. And I don't think it was a surprise to any of our officers that, they knew it needed improving. But, through all the witnesses that we saw, it was clear that once they'd started the engagement and events and explained the process more clearly, the uptake was much better. And I think moving forward, that's where we would look to go. It's more about event holding, and to be fair, CoreServe a fair bit of that with quite good outcomes. I thought Cath's report was quite telling in that regard. So it does show that with engagement and events it moves forward, but it's a team thing, and I agree with Councillor Burton, as I always do. Digital rollout is king. Thanks very much. That's me done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mould. Now I'm going to go to Mike Eathorne-Gibbons to sum up, as he's the cabinet member for this. But are there any other comments from members of the team or members of the wider committee that are here today, or any other member who would like to make a comment before I go to Mike Eathorne-Gibbons and then to the recommendations? Okay, Mike, would you like to say a few words at this stage?
Yes, very happy to, Chairman. As I said right at the beginning, a lot of very good work has been done by Martin and the team, and I think the support given by Rachel and the team to the work also has been tremendous. And certainly I would like to express my personal thanks to both the Martin Eddy and his team and to Rachel and her team for the superb work they've done here. It is a large, complex area, it's been indicated already, with a spend of something like 800 million and 5,500 suppliers. It's a major part of what the council does. And clearly the aim all the time is to get the best possible service or goods at lowest possible price. That goes without saying. But we have to recognise in this day and age the importance of social value, and so I certainly welcome the importance given to that. As has been mentioned also by Carol Mole just now, small business initially is very nervous about working with Cornwall Council because it feels it's bureaucratic, etc., etc. But I think there have been discussions with them now, and I think they are reassured, but clearly more work has to be done. And I'm pleased that there's full recommendations on page 57, item 4 in that regard, and I think that will all go well. Communications is very much the essence of this, and regular meetings with them to reassure them, I think, is essential. The other point I'd make, again, bottom of that page, is paragraph 5, where in effect, as the Cabinet member with responsibility for procurement, I'm very happy to demonstrate the necessary leadership here, and certainly I will be stressing when it comes to Cabinet the intent to develop social value, including carbon reduction, and also point B there, the importance of policy direction in adding value and maximising every pound spent in Cornwall. Clearly that makes sense, and I again will be using my endeavours as the chairman of the shareholder board for CorServe and the group of companies and Treveth to ensure that they follow this approach as well. Again, as Carol said just now, I think Kath Robinson, as the MD of CorServe, is supportive of it. So I think everybody is on board. We've just got to make it work. And that will be a challenge for all of us in the new administration. So I think that's all I wanted to say at the moment, Chairman. Just to repeat again, to endorse the superb work that has been done over a period of time. Now it's a question of making it happen.
Thank you very much indeed, General. Thank you. I echo those sentiments entirely. Tracy Clark, could you put up the revised recommendations so members are clear? And then ask if I could. I think we've got. I think Martin Eddy proposed the recommendations, and I believe that it was Councillor Keeling that seconded them.
Yes, that's it, Chairman. So I'm just trying to get the screen so I can see the recommendations and see the meeting as well. There we go. So hopefully you can see the revised recommendations there. So proposed by Councillor Eddy and seconded by Councillor Keeling. If you take first of all on page 19 of the agenda, those two recommendations stand, as Councillor Eddy pointed out in his part of the meeting. And then the recommendations on page 20 amended to the following: recommendations to the Cabinet that 1, the recommendations of the Working with and Developing Local Supply Chains Working Group as set out in section 5, pages 28 to 31 of the report attached to Appendix 1 are approved, with the following addition to recommendation 2A. Initially, this will need to be restricted to services contracts, not works or supplies contracts, until such time as the Local Government Act 1980 1988 section 17, which prohibits a local authority from taking into account the location of business activities or interests of contractors, may be repealed or amended to override the prohibition. Number 2, the draft responsible procurement policy attached to Appendix 2 is approved once amended to reflect the above addition to recommendation 2A of the working group's report. Number 3, the draft social value policy note attached to Appendix 3 is approved once amended to reflect the above addition to recommendation 2A of the working group's report. And then an additional recommendation to the Leader of the Council that the Leader writes to the Cabinet Office to lobby for the repeal or amendment of Section 17 of the Local Government Act 1988, removing the restrictions that apply to local authorities in respect of reserving contracts for works or supplies. So if we could, that's proposed by Councillor Eddy, seconded by Councillor Keeling. If we could go to the vote, please. David Atherfold.
Councillor Atherfold, 4.
Councillor Barnes.
4.
Councillor Biggs. Councillor Biggs. Councillor Biggs, are you muted? We'll come back to Councillor Biggs. Councillor Burden.
4.
Councillor Buscombe.
4.
Councillor Eddy.
4.
Councillor Fitter.
Fitter, 4.
Councillor Frost.
4.
Councillor Hawkins.
4.
Councillor Keeling.
4.
Councillor Monk.
4.
Councillor Moorcroft.
4.
Councillor Mould.
Carol Mould, 4.
Councillor Saunders.
Councillor Saunders, 4.
And Councillor Biggs, are you on the call? Councillor Biggs?
Yes, 4, sorry.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Biggs. So I can confirm, Chairman, that was carried unanimously.
Thank you very much indeed, Tracy. Thank you for that. Now, members, we're now on to agenda item 8, update from the cabinet members. But we do need to stop this particular transmission. Can I just get some guidance from Tracy and Debbie, please? Would this be a good time for us to come off this sort of system and move on to the next? Could we do that now? Rather than, thank you, Dave. Thanks for that. So, could I just say to councillors and officers, if you just sort of technically stay put, so to speak, if there are any members of the press and public listening, could you join the next part of the meeting via the second link on the front of the published agenda? I hope that'll make sense, because at 2 o'clock we'll be sort of logged off this particular broadcast channel, and we need to move to another. So any members of the press and public listening, if you could log on to the next part of the meeting as set out on the front page of the published agenda. But councillors and officers, remain where you are, and then we will wait for Debbie to tell us that the next live stream is operational. Is that